um, there we go. That's better. Um, this might this if this sunlight gets a little too distracting, I'll close the curtains. But I prefer natural sunlight since I'm not a troglodyte. So um, first of all, I want to apologize for yesterday, guys. So yesterday I was doing a stream on anime. I was, just having discussion, wondering what was people's favorite anime, whether series or movie. Um, what were they currently watching, and we got like most through over halfway through the stream before it cut out, and that was on my end. That was my mistake. Um, so we have someone remodeling the kitchen, and he was trying to turn off the power for the kitchens because he needs to rewire it, but he hit the wrong switch, and that wasn't his fault either because the people did the who labeled the circuit breaker in our basement, they mislabeled everything, so it's hard to know what goes to what. Like there's two switches for the kitchen itself, and both of those are in reverse, and then the kitchen switches are mislabeled with the switches for the other parts of the house. So he made a mistake and he cut that off. Um, and then when he flipped them and we had power back upstairs where I have my man cave. But then I think he must have hit another switch, the wrong one, which hit the power in the basement, which cut off um, the internet connection because that's where our Wi-Fi is, right? Um, so again, the anime the anime stream ended kind of prematurely. So again, I apologize. Like I said, we had a technician who's remodeling the entire kitchen, and he hit the wrong power switches, which led to the power going out and the internet connection as well. So I just ended the stream there. I didn't want to continue on since it was already through 2 hours. But for anyone who still wanted to like talk about anime, you can do so in this stream. But this will be a different topic today. Okay. Um, and for people from yesterday who are either asking what would be a good anime to start out with if they're an adult, or someone or one of the guys who's a loyal follower of the channel who actually said he's never watched anime and I was giving recommendations. So I just want to say to that, my recommendations were like Attack on Titan or Tokyo Ghoul, or even the very new show right now, Vinland Saga, which um, I'm not sure about Tokyo Ghoul, but you can find Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga both on Netflix. Tokyo Ghoul, yeah, I'm sure you can catch that on Crunchyroll and maybe on Hulu. Not sure, but it is that all of them are easily accessible. And also, I wanted to make a correction. I've mentioned the series Castlevania on Netflix. That is not an anime. It is also made by the same studio that did Blood of Zeus, which I'm currently watching and I like, and Size Manos. None of those three series, those cartoon series, are actually anime. They're not, because they're not produced and made in any Japanese animation studio, which is the defining feature of any anime, is that they're actually made in a Japanese animation studio. So that one is made here in America, I think in like Texas or somewhere. So that doesn't count as anime. Although I would highly recommend you watching them, especially if you were a kid that grew up playing Castlevania. And Blood of Zeus is just good for people who like Greek mythology and stuff like that. But those aren't uh, Japanese animation. In any case, I want to jump right into the subject today, and that is the topic of Star Wars. Not the same discussion we had about Star Wars before. We're going to talk about this new series called The Acolyte and why it is horrible because it's destroying the canon. Any sort of irrelevant topics, I'm just going to ignore you. And if you troll the stream, I'm just going to ban you. This is not your platform. This is mine. When you and don't say what about freedom of such and such. Social media platforms aren't freedom of expression. You signed a term of service when you joined any sort of any sort of social media platform. So we're going to talk about what I want to talk about, or you can go to somewhere else. So all these irrelevant questions I'm already seeing in the live stream, I'm not answering them. If you have a question, drop a Cash App. My Cash App is in the link in my description on the YouTube channel. That's the only way I'm answering any question that has nothing to do with the topic. Like I said, the only other thing I will be addressing is anime, because again, my stream from yesterday ended prematurely because my technician remodeling our kitchen accidentally hit the power in the middle of a stream, so we lost connectivity. Other than that, not answering anything that has nothing to do with anime or Star Wars. And specifically, when we're talking about Star Wars, we're talking about the new show, The Acolyte, on Disney Plus, the horrible new series. We're going to talk about why that's horrible. Okay, in the background, we have some new music. This time, it's not Chinese classical music, but it is like it's like an AI generated music. It says samurai meditation in cold winter, strong will and not afraid of difficulties. So it's sort of like a like the Japanese flute music. I forgot the name of the instrument they used in Japan that gives you that sound, but that's the music that's going to be in the background. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Dilfit says, Yo, Contrarian, Castlevania Netflix series was amazing. The spin-off series that came out, though, was disappointing. Yeah, the spin-off was, it was mediocre, which I expected because it's not connected to connected to the original content of Castlevania. But yeah, Castlevania is a great show. But like I was saying, I made the mistake yesterday of saying it was anime, but Castlevania is not anime. It's still worth watching, even if it's not anime though, because it's just a well-made, cartoon series. And apparently that studio makes a lot of high quality content, because they also made Blood of Zeus, and I like that show as well. I'm still finishing the second season. I got kind of caught up because I've been watching other things, so I haven't been able to finish Blood of Zeus. And I got ahead in a few episodes where I wasn't even really watching it. I wasn't paying attention because I was like either talking with someone or reading or eating. So I had to go back several episodes to catch up with where I was actually paying attention on Blood of Zeus. But guys, so the show The Acolyte, I have not watched it and I refuse to. I pretty much said that after the series Ahsoka was so disappointing that I would not watch any more Disney Star Wars. And from now on, I separate the original Star Wars by George Lucas to Disney Star Wars, which is everything that came after 2012 when George Lucas sold Lucasfilm to Disney for $4.3 billion. there's rumors that it has not been profitable for Disney, because although the sequel trilogy did very well in the theaters financially, they were considered critical failures, and we don't know how much money they made minus the money that had to go to the box office. I mean, to the because usually the profits split halfway between them and the theaters, and then you have to recoup your costs for like how much you put into like both the production and the marketing of the movie. So it's an open question whether they profited from those from both those sequel trilogy movies and from their Disney Plus series. A crazy movie. You can talk about anime. Like I said, I don't mind because I know a lot of people missed it because even though it went for 2 hours, I probably would have went for like at least another hour, but the power got cut off. So anyway, guys, so I've tried, because I love Star Wars so much. I've stuck through all the horrible stuff Disney has made over the last 11 years, and I reached my breaking point with Ahsoka. Like, it started in 2012 with their animated show Rebels, which was supposed to be the successor to the Clone Wars, where it takes place the uh, right before the rebellion really kicks off, and we find like a new Jedi. Well, he's not really a Jedi. He was a Jedi Padawan who was saved during Order 66. If you don't know what Order 66 was, oh, I'm going to have to take you back. But yeah, Order 66 was a directive by Emperor Palpatine or Darth Sidious for all the clone troopers to kill all Jedis on sight at the end of the Clone Wars. And obviously a few Jedi escape, but with Disney, they've made it more and more and more and more people have escaped, just so they can have Jedi to talk about, um, outside of Luke, in the original trilogy. So one of these Padawans was this guy named Kanan Jarrus, who ended up joining a rebel cell and hid his force sensitivity for a long time until he came in contact with this kid who was force sensitive, and he decided to teach him. And the show was up and down, but I think it caught its legs within like the last two seasons. So it was okay. Then at the time, Disney started remaking the comic books, but this time they had it. They started making the comic books under Marvel Comics instead of under Dark Horse Comics when it was with George Lucas. Like, originally it was with Marvel Comics when it first came out in the 70s and the early 80s run of the Star Wars comics, but then they ended their run, and George Lucas gave, I guess, the rights over to Dark Horse Comics, and that is actually considered like some of the best stuff that came out of the Star Wars expanded universe, which is now called Legends by Disney Plus. But since most of us don't give a fuck about Disney, we still continue calling it the expanded universe and not Star Wars Legends. But in the expanded universe, it was like stuff outside of everything that was going on in the trilogy, right? So, and I have a few things from that. Actually, I have them now as Legends after they were reprinted, under Marvel Comics, but it's the same stuff from Dark Horse Comics. So I have a few of those comics, graphic novels rather. But so I've read some of the comics that came out with Disney, which were kind of good. I watched Rebels back in 2013 when that first came out, which was so. Like, George Lucas sold Star Wars all of Lucasfilm to Disney back in 2012, and then the year after is when they made the Rebels cartoon, which a lot of people didn't see because originally it only aired on Disney XD. So you had to, so if you didn't have cable, and if you didn't have, and even if you did have cable, if you didn't have Disney XD, you wouldn't have saw it until now. If you watched it on Disney Plus or some other platform, um, and then that same year, 2013, is when they restarted the Star Wars comics back under Marvel again, which it hadn't been since the 80s. And then they started planning the sequel trilogy, which everyone was actually excited for originally. Even when the first movie came out, even though it was just like a nostalgia bait, and that it was basically just a rehash of a New Hope, people still had hope for it, but it was trashed by the second movie and even worse by the third. Then you had these Disney Plus series. So Mandalorian was considered like the pilot, like the Mandalorian was like the flagship show for Disney Plus when it first came out in 2019. Like that was literally the only reason I got Disney Plus at the time. Like, I actually was sharing at the time I was sharing the stream with my supervisor, who's also a big Star Wars nerd like me, and we were watching it. We were both excited for it. The first two seasons were awesome. The second season saw us bring back Luke, through some deep fake technology. It gave us an adult Ahsoka played by Rosario Dawson, which at the time was great. So I was looking forward to the fact that they were making a show off of it, off of just her. Then they had some other shows that didn't do too well, like they had the Book of Boba Fett, which was horrible, just horrible. They had the Obi-Wan Kenobi miniseries, which was originally supposed to be a movie, but because the Han Solo movie did so poorly in the movies, they decided to not do Kenobi as an actual movie, but instead as a series on Disney Plus. That was a mistake because it was very low budget, and it seemed like they stretched it out where it didn't need to be. It seemed like it would have been better suited for like a big movie than a TV series. Same thing with Book of Boba Fett. Like that probably should have just been a movie, but it just seemed so unnecessary, and it kind of like did a disservice to the legacy of Boba Fett. And I'm gonna get to the comments soon, guys. I'm just gonna rush through this, and then we can get to the comments. So I watched all that stuff. There was one show that was canceled. They was supposed to be about like the I guess like the pilots and stuff like that of the new rebellion. It was supposed to be basically about the some of the people who are now the leaders of the new rebellion army. I mean, not this. Sorry, not the new rebellion. The new galactic republic. But that got canceled because it was supposed to star Gina Carano, who got fired from Star Wars because they didn't like that she shared her opinions on Twitter that didn't coalesce with the whole LGHDTV alphabet mafia. So she got fired because of that. Now she's actually suing them and has a very powerful lawyer behind her to do so, who was hired by Elon Musk himself to back her in this. So we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, that show never came out. Then we had Andor. Andor is a spin-off series, a Disney Plus spin-off series from the Star Wars movie called Rogue One, which was a whole movie generated just to explain how the rebels stole the plans for the Death Star, which was their whole plot of the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, was they had to take down the Death Star. The whole movie Rogue One was about how they got those plans, and that was probably the best thing Disney made was Rogue One. When people say that Star Wars fans hate women and all this sort of stuff, that's not true. we love Rogue One. I've not heard a single person who's either a new Star Wars fan or an original Star Wars fan like myself ever say that Rogue One sucked, because Rogue One was awesome. It's how you do it well, and a lot of people like the Andor show. I didn't though, because it didn't have the Star Wars feel to it. It was more of a it was supposed to be more of a thriller, whereas Star Wars is more, it's more like a science fantasy, but you have very little of those elements in Andor. But still, some people liked it because it was well written, and the guy who stars in it was pretty good as the star. And it's like it's actually as a prequel to what happened in Rogue One, because Andor is the name of the guy of the rebel who ends up helping the girl steal the plans for the Death Star. And like I said, that whole little part of the rebellion that went off to do this were called Rogue One, which is awesome. So can't give that enough praise. And I think out of many of the movies that George Lucas has criticized since Disney taking over, he actually had good things to say about Rogue One, which makes sense because, like I said, the fans love it as well. So anyway, I think those are all the shows up until Ahsoka. And again, I was stoked for Ahsoka. One, the bad guy, Diana Lee Inosanto, is the daughter of Guru Dan Inosanto. Guru in like the Philippines and Indonesia, Guru means like teacher or instructor. He's the foremost guy in America for being an expert in Filipino martial arts, and he's the head of the John Fan Jeet Kune Do. So she was brought in to be like the foil to Ahsoka, and they're probably like the same. I think she's probably like older than Rosario Dawson, and she can move much better than her. They had to slow things down so that Rosario Dawson can look believable as Ahsoka, which is horrible because anyone who remembers Ahsoka from Clone Wars knows that she's very acrobatic. Rosario Dawson looked every bit of a middle-aged woman trying to look like she can fight, and it was just bad. The only good part of Ahsoka was when they brought back Christian Hayden to replay Anakin Skywalker. That was the only good part of that show, but otherwise it was trash, and it was so bad. Like I said, I was like, I'm just done. I was like, I'm tired of watching bad Star Wars content just because I love Star Wars. I'm not going to keep watching bad stuff that they put out just because they slapped a sticker on it that says Star Wars. So I was done, which was a shame because she played Ahsoka so well in The Mandalorian second season. And by the way, the third season was trash too because they decided to make it all about femininity and dumb shit like that. Like the whole show, which was supposed to be about the Mandalorian himself, the original guy, and his relationship with Grogu, because it was basically supposed to be it's loosely based off of the Japanese manga, which was turned into a movie, I think by Akira Kurosawa, which is The Lone Wolf and Cub. The Mandalorian was supposed to be like sort of a Star Wars take on the Lone Wolf and Cub thing from coming from manga and the old Japanese samurai movie. So people who are nerdy, like we were talking about anime and manga, might be familiar with the Lone Wolf and Cub manga. And I'm pretty sure they did an anime about it as well. But if not, there's the Lone Wolf and Cub manga, and they did a old movie about that back in the 70s or something like that, with the lonely traveling Ronin warrior and his son going to seek revenge, and it's just badass as hell. But they did such a bad job. I was like, I'm not watching anything else. And when the Acolyte came out, I was like, I'm not doing it, guys. It's like, first of all, it's produced by someone who no one wants touching Star Wars content, Leslie Hetland. She's the former assistant to Harvey Weinstein. A lot of people have a lot of questions about how much she knew about his depravity and what he was doing. And she's just some queer feminist bitch who wants to inject her own experiences into Star Wars. and it has nothing to do with furthering the Star Wars mythos, giving us something that Star Wars fans would enjoy. No, it's just about her injecting her own experiences as being an ugly lesbian into Star Wars. So now we got space lesbian witches who can wield the Force and have basically they've rewritten canon. So and the so the Jedi sort of like bad guys now. Like they just go around kidnapping children who are Force sensitive, which is not what they did. They've always asked the parents permission, say, "Hey, we can teach them how to use these powers," and so forth. They've never stolen anyone's children or kidnapped them just by virtue of the fact that they're Force sensitive. That doesn't happen. They got them doing that. Um, they have these witches who are not the Night Sisters. Most people are familiar with the Night Sisters of Dathomir from either the Clone Wars or they've read some of the expanded universe novels. And the Night Sisters were a Force sensitive group of women from these species of people on the planet Dathomir. Dathomir is also the same planet where Darth Maul comes from. He's that race of people, but all the women are Force sensitive and form this coven of Night Sisters, which is like a witch coven. But they're not in the expanded universe. They weren't the only witches on Dathomir, so apparently there's some others on the planet who also use the Force, and in the show they call it the thread that binds everything. I'm like, okay, whatever. But they literally give these space lesbian witches literally give rise to two twins out of the Force itself, which is not enough power that anyone's ever had. Like when Anakin was born, he was born from the Force itself. No one made him. He was born out of the Force itself because uh, of Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious's attempts to try to create life uh, through manipulation of the Force, through the dark side of the Force, and because of their tinkering, their attempts to try to manipulate the Force to control nature and give life and give life rising out of the dark side. The Force, in answer to that, gave us the chosen one, Anakin Skywalker. That's what happened. But now, fuck that. The Acolyte just has these Force witches create these twins who are both Force sensitive. One ends up being taken to become a Jedi. The other one now is a dark side user, and we think she's gonna be the Acolyte to a Sith Lord, which again also breaks canon because we know from the prequel trilogy that when Darth Maul first appeared, there had never been a Sith seen for 1,000 years in the Galactic Republic. So they break further canon in this new episode that just came out, I believe yesterday, episode 4, where it was the Jedi Master himself, Ki-Mundi. I forgot how you pronounce his name. Ki-Mundi, whatever his name is. He's an alien Jedi Master who said, we have not seen the Sith in the Millennium. Mind you, he was 70 years old in the Phantom Menace, the first movie of the prequel trilogy. He was 70 years old, and the Acolyte takes place 200 years before the happenings of the Phantom Menace. However, somehow he's retconned to be a Jedi Knight in this new series. That happens 130 years after the happenings of the Phantom Menace. Like how? He literally wouldn't have even been alive. And this isn't just based on expanded universe stuff, which some expanded universe isn't always canon, but anything that happens in the movies is completely canon. If he was 70 in that movie, he would not have been an adult, not even born in that era of the High Republic in this new show, The Acolyte, right? It's crazy as shit. So now we have Sith that weren't supposed to be known any Sith for 1,000 years. We have a master who wasn't even known to have lived in that period, who's now a Jedi Knight in that time, even though he was already 70 years old in the in the Phantom Menace. Now he would have to be uh like over 200 years old by the Phantom Menace. Plus, his species is not known to be long living. Like their his species has a shorter lifespan than humans. The only one who would have been around at the time is Yoda, and they have not shown him in the series. Also, in the series, they have refused to tell the Jedi High Council that they've encountered dark side users who've killed Jedi. So that makes no sense at all. So you have a dark side user, someone who hasn't, who seems to have as to be as powerful as a Sith Lord, going around killing Jedi, and it's not brought to the attention of the Jedi High Council because they don't want them to um, to react to the failings of these Jedi Knights to stop these people. Also, as I was saying, my problem with Ahsoka, one of the things, Sabine Wren, one of the characters off of Clone Wars, Rebels, who's in the live action version of Ahsoka, she gets stabbed by a lightsaber, and then 2 weeks later, she is fine. Mind you, a lightsaber is a plasma sword, so it's basically a plasma that's contained within an electric field, and um, lightsabers have been described as being hotter than the surface of the sun. So when they stab you, it's going to be instant death or dismemberment. Like if it cuts off something, it's going to be instant dismemberment, and because it's so hot, it's so hot. Wherever it dismembers you, it's going to instantly just where it cuts you, it's going to instantly just cauterize that part of the body. But she was stabbed in her midsection, which meant she should have died, because not only would it have impaled her, it would have basically just liquefied everything from which it contacted. But she survives within 2 weeks. But a fucking Jedi in the first episode of the Acolyte dies from a throwing knife, a fucking throwing knife. But yet, but yet you got people surviving laser swords. Crazy. So that's my rant. I'm gonna get into the comments. The ones that are irrelevant, I'm not gonna address. Uh, Delphin says I dropped Star Wars after Mandalorian season 3. Exactly. They're going to do a Mandalorian 4, so I'm going to watch it just to finish it out. But I'm not going to see the movie because there's also supposed to be a movie based on the Mandalorian Grogu thing. Because it's basically going to be a movie that kind of puts together all the spin-off shows from Mandalorian, which is Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka. All of those are going to be contained within this Mandalorian verse movie, which is yet to be named. But they're also supposed to be a Mandalorian 4 season. I thought like they should just end it with the ending of how they ended season 3, with them getting their own land on the planet where Tarf the black guy who died in real life, who played the um the leader of that planet. That's where they should leave it off. They don't need a season 4. I don't even think they need a movie, but I'm definitely not paying to see it. But if they do a season 4, I will watch it just to see if they kind of course correct from everything they did from season 3. But more than likely they're not. And I don't know. And I guess if they do the Mandalorian movie, it's basically going to address the fact that Grand Admiral Thrawn has been rescued from that other galaxy in Ahsoka. So he's in a completely other galaxy, and they rode these star whales that can travel at light speed. They travel to this other galaxy. And apparently, within like the I don't know if it's expanded universe lore or if it's just new Disney Star Wars lore, that these star whales are originally how people learned how to navigate um, across the galaxy using light speed technology was from them studying these star whales. But I will probably check out season 4 if they comes out, but I'm not watching the movie if they do that. Definitely not. And you're right, yeah, they brought back Grogu because the president of Disney didn't want to lose their cash cow. They were planning on bringing back Grogu after the events of season 2, but what I think they changed it. I don't think it was originally supposed to be. I think it was a bad idea that they brought back Grogu in a different show. Like they shouldn't have brought back Grogu in Book of Boba Fett. They did that to get people to watch Book of Boba Fett, which was it was not a good show on its own. Boba Fett was such an awesome character. You shouldn't have needed Mandalorian Grogu to carry the show. But the best part of the Book of Boba Fett was when the Mandalorian showed up and he regained Grogu. That should have happened in season 3 of the Mandalorian. That should not have happened within the Book of Boba Fett. That's that show is so bad. Crazy Muda says my favorite Star Wars movie as a kid was the Christmas special. So let's address that too. Crazy Muda named Ice Cube. I was just saying it to be funny like that. But so we saw the Rotten Tomato score. So up until the Acolyte, the Hollywood, the Star Wars Christmas special has been known as the worst thing that has ever come out of Star Wars. Even George Lucas himself admitted that he hates the Hollywood that Christmas special. It came out in 1978, the year after the original movie came out, and it came out on TV. He You can't even find. I don't even think the whole thing is on Disney Plus. The only part on Disney Plus you can find is the animated part of the Christmas special that shows their the first appearance of Boba Fett. It was like an animated part of the Christmas special, and it brings back all the actors to do the voiceover roles for their characters on the animated part. But the live action Christmas special part, um, I still don't think that's available on Disney Plus. No one likes it. It has been the most reviled part of Star Wars canon, and I mean it was written out of canon, of course, but it's been the most reviled content made in Star Wars for like the last 45 years. But and you even see it on Rotten Tomatoes because it sits at a 21% Rotten Tomatoes score for the audience and 25% for the critic score. So reviled by both the critics and the audience. Whereas now we go to the Acolyte. The Acolyte is rated lower than the Christmas special, which has for a long time been known as the worst thing that ever came out of Star Wars. So because of critics who are getting paid to give bit reviews and basically a bunch of little flaming Pride Month people who love this new show because it's all about being gay and queer, that they've given it like I think like a 85% critic score, but the audience score sits at 14%. 14%. It is the most hated property ever made in Star Wars currently. And I predict after this episode 4 that is just completely rewritten canon, having Ki-Mundi appear in the High Republic, which he wouldn't have been born at the time, and the fact that they are addressing the Sith Lord, which wasn't known to have appeared in any time up until Darth Maul, that and that they brought about two twins through sheer use of the dark side of the Force. That is, I think the score is going to sink lower than 14%, and we've never seen of all the sequel trilogies. As much as people hated The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker within the sequel trilogy, Those scores aren't as low as this, 14%. And I said the Christmas special was the most hated part of Star Wars back in the day, and that sits at 21%. And Acolyte sits below that at 14% currently on Rotten Tomatoes. This was last night, so it may have gone up a percentage or even down a percentage since last night. And it's not just review bombers. They always try to use it's simply not review bombers. It's people who just dislike what Disney has done to the Star Wars, and now they can't gaslight fans anymore and say these people aren't true Star Wars fans, because George Lucas himself came out on his dislike of what Disney has done to Star Wars himself at the Cannes Film Festival last month, when he received the highest award at the Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or award, for being an exceptional filmmaker. They asked him questions and he was completely forthright about it. He said Disney doesn't understand Star Wars mythos. He said they have not asked for his input, and after he sold it to him, he decided not to try to interfere. But he said they don't even understand basic concepts like the Force. Like, and in the show, they're trying to give some sort of moral relativism with the Force. Like, balance in the Force was very well explained by Lucas to the people on his team, and we have it on video, and you can check it out on YouTube if you don't believe me. He said balance in the Force is not equal parts good light side and equal part dark side. That's not how balance works. He's taking it from a Buddhist concept of harmony when he's talking about balance in the Force. Balance in the Force is achieved by absence of the dark side. So when you have when Force users seek, dark side has always been associated with being selfish and evil. So when people seek to use the Force for their own selfish needs, they embrace the dark side of the Force. That creates an imbalance in the Force. Okay? Because when you get things, and when you seek to or when you seek to have things and keep those things, it leads you more and more into the dark side, because once you have them, then you want to keep them. Once you keep them, you want no one else to have them. You will resent other people, and you will do anything to protect what your own wants and needs and desires. That's not healthy. It leads to an imbalance in the Force. Regain imbalance in the Force is embracing the light side of the Force. It is not a balance between the dark and the light. That has never been how George Lucas explained about the Force and how it works. And people at Lucasfilm, like that dumb bitch Kathleen Kennedy, don't understand that. And people for a long time acted like Dave Filoni was George Lucas' protege. He is not his protege. He is probably more feminist than Kathleen Kennedy and Leslie Hetland. He's a moron. Even like people think he was his protege because he worked with Lucas on the Clone Wars animated series, which most people love. But most of that is beloved because of George Lucas' involvement in it. And George Lucas addressed in an interview like several years ago that he said I don't have any protege. He said Star Wars is strictly my is my passion project. It's like something I'm passionate about. He said I didn't have any people that I've studied under me that I've just I've made so that they will be able to carry on Star Wars after me. He said Star Wars starts and ends with me. He said yes, I have people working with me on stuff outside of the main movies, like Clone Wars and stuff like that, like Dave Filoni. He said I've never taken on like any sort of like protege or anything like that. So he addressed that rumor a long time ago, because Disney's PR team did a lot of gaslighting again trying to make fans believe that Dave Filoni is like the protege of George Lucas, and he never was. So, all right, back to the comments. Crazy Moon says, "Remember the old Star Wars malt liquor ads from back in the day?" I don't know. Malt liquor ads? Absolutely not. I don't remember them doing anything to remotely promote liquor. I think if I think you're misremembering that the actor who played Landau Calrissian used to do Colt 45 commercials. That has nothing to do with Star Wars. But yeah, Billy D. Williams used to star in these Colt 45 liquor commercials and print ads, but that had nothing to do with Star Wars. Star Wars has never promoted liquor because Star Wars was geared towards children, to like 12-year old boys, so they would have never marketed themselves to by promoting liquor. You're misremembering the Colt 45 commercial ads with Billy D. Williams. That was not connected with Star Wars. Jofa says, "I think new Star Wars shines better in animation than in live action. Like Rebels, it wasn't the best, but it has been better than all of these live action failures." Yeah, but that's a pretty low bar, Dilfit. That's a pretty low bar to clear. And yeah, just like and then like there's a spinoff off of Clone Wars and Rebels, which was the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch was kind of good. Well, it by the second season it was kind of bad. The first season was good, and the last season was alright, but the second season was really bad. But it had a good ending for the Bad Batch. So yeah, the Bad Batch and Rebels was pretty much at least they're watchable. But there was another they did another animated series that was based off of the new Star Wars, the sequel trilogy. It was about the fighter pilots that came out of the New Republic era. No one liked that cartoon series, so you never really heard anyone talk about it, other than someone mentioning how bad it is. And I can't even remember the name of it. I think it's called, it might be called Rebellion something or other, but it's about the New Republic era of the pilots. This happens. It's supposed to happen like in the timeline between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi. It's stuck within that timeline, and nobody likes it. And it's more geared towards children, but again, it's still, it sucks. Argilla Cinecore 87 says, "I'm watching, bro. What's up?" Crazy Moon says, "I know this is all type, but it's Juneteenth, and I saw some people like Sexy Red." Well, I'm not even addressing that. I do think I'm going to do a second live stream today, which is going to talk about Juneteenth, but I'm not talking about that right now because I just don't want to derail the conversation with all of that right now. Don T says, "I'm a big fan of the new Landale. He's played by my political hero Donald Glover. Sorry, Donald Glover's not a political hero. He's just an entertainer. And no one liked. I'm sorry to say, Don. No one liked the Han Solo show. It was that the Solo movie was the first Star Wars movie that ever flopped. I mean, because even my wife was surprised, like when we were at the mall, and she's like, she knows I love Star Wars. She was like, "You don't want to see Solo?" I'm like, No, I don't want to see it. She's like, "Oh." So she was shocked because she knows I love Star Wars because I got her to watch all the movies with me. So she assumed I was gonna like it. I said, "Nah, I'm not watching this." And like they retconned his character. Like now he's pansexual. No one needs a pansexual Lando Calrissian. And for some of you guys think I'm joking, I'm not joking. They literally said that he's now pansexual. And in the Solo movie, because I did watch it when it came on the Disney Plus, when either when it came on Netflix or when it came on Disney Plus, whichever when it came on first. I watched it then, and he was having a sexual relationship with his droid. That shit was crazy. And the bad guy way in the background was Darth Maul, because this was during the era when he was still alive, because after he was allegedly he was originally killed by Kenobi in Phantom Menace. He stayed alive through his sheer use of the Force, and ended up getting artificial legs and all that sort of stuff. And he started running the under became an underworld boss. And George Lucas' original plans for his version of the sequel trilogy was going to have Darth Maul as the overarching bad guy in the new sequel trilogy, who was going to run a criminal empire that was threatening the entire galaxy. That was going to be, I believe, one of the parts that George Lucas originally wanted for his version of the sequel trilogy, which Disney decided not to use. But yeah, I don't like Donald Glover's Lando. He didn't resemble him. No one wanted to see a pansexual Lando Calrissian. No one needed to explain exactly how the Millennium Falcon made the the Cassian run. No, it sucked. Therefore, I think it's a shame that Disney never gave Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, any more Star Wars content to write. It is, but I'm not surprised. Remember, they kept firing and hiring so many different directors. There were so many directors rumored to take on stuff. People got fired, then they brought on other directors, because he wasn't even supposed to be the original director of Rogue One. They changed that. And Ron Howard wasn't originally supposed to be the director of Solo. Like, they kept changing that. Remember, even the producers behind Game of Thrones, at one point they were supposed to make a movie. Taika Waititi was supposed to make a Star Wars movie. Um, at one point they were gonna give that idiot who made The Last Jedi and just fucked up the entire the entire Jedi, like, understanding of Jedi and all of that. They were gonna give him his own trilogy that would happen outside of the Skywalker saga. They were gonna give him his own trilogy outside of that, and he claimed that because he was working on other movies outside of Disney that he never had time to do it. But let's be honest, they got scared because they realized the fan reaction to him, and they just decided not to keep him on to do other Star Wars projects. But it's obvious that was the real reason, and not because he was just too busy making those other movies. But yeah, there's been so many directors that came and went. We were lucky that Gareth Edwards gave us Rogue One in all its glory. It was so good. Having Donnie Yen play one of the monks of one of the Force monks. Um, that that was just dope, and that was actually Donnie Yen's idea to be a blind man. That wasn't part of the script. He said he wanted to play a blind man, sort of like how he does in John Wick 4. Rogue One was it was a great movie for it to be a Disney made Star Wars. That was like one of the best things they ever made. That and the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian. Crazy Muda says, why can't we have lesbians in Star Wars? There's plenty of them in real life. They should have gotten Rosie O'Donnell to play a lesbian Jabba the Hutt. I think you're being funny, but the point is not that they're lesbian. The point is that this show is all about projecting Leslie Headland's own personal experiences into Star Wars instead of it being about Star Wars itself. Like, they changed, like, they basically just took away what was special about Anakin being the chosen one in the first place, is that he was created out of the Force. Like, I mean, he was born to his mother, like, biologically, of course, but he had no father because he was actually a product of the Force itself, and it was a reaction to the Sith attempting to create life out of the Force through their own manipulation of the dark side. that was a special thing, and it kind of just takes all this. It, it 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 takes what was unique about that by just having these women who are not neither Jedi nor Sith, and just through their own selfish desires. And again, selfishness is always a part of the dark side of the Force, even if they don't call it the Force themselves, they call it the thread. But and they're not even Night Sisters, they're just an off-brand, they're just some off-brand witch, they're just some off-brand Force witches who also happen to live on the planet of Darthamir. They're not even the Night Sisters, who are the only people that people are familiar with from the Star Wars franchise, are the Night Sisters. The 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 lady that plays the bad guy in Ahsoka, played by the phenomenal martial artist Diana Lee Inosanto, daughter of Giro Dan Inosanto and goddaughter to Bruce Lee, by the way. She's his goddaughter. She played a Night Sister from Dathomir. They didn't even use the Night Sisters, so instead they just used some off-brand lesbian bitches who can just manipulate the Force and give rise to two Force sensitive twins. One who ends up becoming a Jedi, a Jedi Padawan or whatever, and the other one who becomes an acolyte of a Sith Lord, who was not even supposed. There weren't even supposed to be any Sith Lords back then. So that's the problem. No one. It's not the problem with there being lesbians. You had some lesbians kiss in the sequel trilogy. That's not a huge deal. It's the fact that they put that their whole agenda over telling a good story. Like, the writing is just horrible in this series. And again, I haven't even watched the show because I refuse to. I just watch all the people who watch it for me, so I don't have to watch it myself, because I don't want to give Disney Plus the the pleasure of using my metrics of watching that show to claim that it was a success. I'm not going to hate watch it. And again, I'm not going to let them use my metrics to show how many people watch the show. I want it to fail so they can course correct, which they probably are never going to do. They'll just run the they're just going to run the franchise into the ground. And I've already said, since episode 3, that has been I have considered episode 3 of the Acolyte the official death of Star Wars as we know it today. Everything they call it now, it's not Star Wars. It's just literally just a sticker putting Star Wars on something that has nothing to do with Star Wars as George Lucas created it. There says there's supposed to be another Star Wars series coming out later this year, but with Disney executives pushing their ideas and opinions on the directors, these TV shows are doomed to fail. Exactly. Only thing I'm aware of is that they're supposed to do a season 2 of Andor, which I might watch. I didn't really care about the first season that much. I might watch the season 2 of Andor, and I'm going to watch season 4 of Mandalorian if that still gets made, because it's been undecided whether they're going to they'll do a season 4 and do a movie, or if they're going to just bundle what would have been season 4 of the Mandalorian into the new movie, and the movie is going to like be the conclusion of all the Mandoverse TV series, which is the Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka. Those are all like the Mandoverse series from Disney Plus. They're supposed to be wrapped up in this new Mandalorian movie, which is supposed to be directed by it's probably going to be directed by Dave Filoni. So it's probably if he directs it, I'm already going to assume that it's going to suck. Just like how Jon Favreau is not doing season 4 of Mandalorian due to the Disney executives making season 3 a hot mess. Is he gone? Oh, see, I didn't know that. If Jon Favreau's not connected to season 4 of The Mandalorian, I'm not watching it. I'm not. I assumed that he would stay on. Because actually he was connected with season 3, because some of the they were using some elements of like Jewish mythology and elements of season 3, right? Like, as far as with the Mandalorians, like, you can see their plight as being sort of like the Israelites in exile, and sort of you can see sort of those parables between the Mandalorians who no longer have their planet and all of this, with them coming back to the planet and all this sort of stuff with the Israelites in exile, and then finally coming back to the promised land and all this sort of stuff. So you see a parable with that, and that allegedly had to do with a lot with what Jon Favreau was putting into the show. So if he's not connected to season 4, I'm not. I'm absolutely not watching it. Ayan says, "Hi man, you're live. My Wi-Fi is bad. No worries. My Wi-Fi messed up yesterday too when I was doing the live stream, so had to end it early." Maxine says, "That brother, I'm on lunch break. Don't really follow the Star Wars story too closely, so I think that's why I quite enjoyed the Acolyte. I like the visuals as usual. The third episode was so corny. So you are a perfect example of this, Max Headland. If you yourself, who are not familiar with Star Wars canon, don't know the 45 the 46 years of all the content that's come out. I was literally born in 77, the year that Star Wars came out. So I am of the Star Wars generation, which is from 1977 to 1983. Everyone born within 1977 to 1983 is called the Star Wars generation. But you know, as far as like what they actually call that generation, they call them Zennials, which is a micro hybrid generation of the last Generation X people and the first millennial people. So they've made this term Zennials, which is a cross of both words, but it's sometimes called the Star Wars generation because that's when the original trilogy came out. So I've always been in Star Wars since it came out. Like, had Star Wars toys, watched the Star Wars movies, saw the last movie, The Return of the Jedi, in the actual theaters in its original theater release. Watched everything since then, like the cartoon shows, like droids and Ewoks. Saw the 2 Ewok movies that came on TV. Never saw the Christmas special because it was so bad that by the time I was a kid, they weren't showing it anymore. Um, read, didn't really read the novels and comic books up until like I was in my 20s. But then, I watched the prequel trilogy and started reading up on all the different parts of the franchise through the Star Wars database website, which is still up, by the way. Um, so I've known tons and tons and tons of Star Wars. So I'm disappointed as a fan, as one of the original fans. But if you're a casual observer of what's going on and you disliked it, that is further evidence that it's just not good. And again, I don't have any problem with there being lesbian or gay people in Star Wars. That's not a problem. It's when you try to use diversity in place of good writing is where it fails. You don't use cultural diversity and stuff like that in place of good writing. Good writing is always going to be the crux of a good TV show and a good movie. You can't replace that with diversity and then gaslight people and say, well, if you don't like this, then you're just a bigot. It doesn't work. It's like you're gaslighting people, and it's called and specifically what they're doing is called fan baiting. So no, I don't have. They want space lesbian witches. More power to them, but it should be a well-written show. It should be a well-written movie. You wouldn't go to a comic book or a novel and just be impressed by the visuals of seeing all these diverse people. I mean, why do you need it? It doesn't even make sense because the majority of the characters in the franchise themselves are aliens. So it doesn't even. So talking about cultural diversity of humans in a galaxy where most people are actually aliens is kind of stupid. So Delphi said, "Oh, is that what the Acolyte is about? I didn't even bother researching what it was about after all of the other failures. I knew Disney was going to add the Alphabet Mafia to Star Wars eventually." Yeah, so the Acolyte is literally about these twins who most people don't, no one knows that they are twins yet. And up, it's like 4 more episodes, so they're halfway through. These two black, these two black female twins who are force sensitive, who are the children of some witches from Darthamir, but they're not Night Sisters. They are new, they are new coven of force witches, who have yet to been given a name in the series, but they're not the Night Sisters that we all know from the Clone Wars and from the expanded universe, who have manipulated the Force, which they call the Thread, and literally willed the Force to create these twins who are both Force sensitive, which destroys the canon of which Anakin was the chosen one, the only one to have been born through the Force. And one, the Jedi, come to Darthamir seeing that there's the Force sensitive child, and they kind of just forced them to give them the child to be raised as a Jedi, which again Jedi do not do. They have never gone across the galaxy forcing parents to give up their children to them to become Jedi. That's not what they've ever done. That's not what they're known for. But they want to relativize good and evil in this show. But no. So they more or less just kidnap this kid. But and these witches are kind of okay with it. They're like, all right, cool, maybe she'll have a better life. Whereas they keep the other one and she ends up being trained by some as to be known dark side user, but more than likely is a Sith Lord, which wasn't supposed to occur in this period because it's been known from the prequel trilogy that for 1,000 years there has been no mention or sight of any Sith of any Sith Lord, and that there was a force of two, something that Yoda had discovered because he would have been around in the time of the High Republic. So for people who don't know, Yoda's species is long lived. Grogu is part of his species, which is why even though he's like 75 years old in the Mandalorian, he's still a baby, or like a toddler. By the Mandalorian, he's already 75 years old, but he's still a toddler. But Yoda's like 900 years old, so he was still a master. In the time of the High Republic, he would have been there running, like probably on the High Council. Um, and that's what the show is about so far. It doesn't make sense. So this Sith acolyte has gone around killing Jedi, and they're blaming the other girl, saying that she did it, the good twin, because because somehow they can't recognize it. Again, Jedi being Jedi would have recognized these are two different people because everyone has a unique presence within the Force. You can feel someone's presence within the Force. So you'll, even if someone is a twin, you'll recognize that this person is different than this other person because their presence in the Force is unique. Of course, if any of these writers knew any fucking thing about Star Wars themselves, they would have known that and would have been able to better write this. But obviously, they don't know better because they literally just used the Jedi Master from the Phantom Menace, who is already 70 and is known to not live as long as humans, and put him 130 years in the past as a Jedi Knight into this new show. And the very man who said in the Phantom Menace that we've never known Sith to have popped up in 1,000 years, and here he's one of the very people fighting this new Sith acolyte. Fucking dumb. It's dumb. And I'm glad I didn't waste any eyeball space to watch these first 4 episodes, nor will I watch the last 4. Dilford asks Max, what else have you watched? Yeah, I'm curious too. And honestly, since I can't see a reply to this, what I'm about to say, because of my Wi-Fi, I like spreading misinfo online. Well, not going to spread misinfo here, my friend. I am, I'm very against spreading misinformation. I'm a very nerdy and pedantic person, and I pride myself on rationalism. So, people who come here trying to spread bad information will not succeed. Maybe somewhere else, but not here. Max says all of them. Oh, okay. So how do you not follow? I'm with Dilf and Max. If you watch all of this content, how are you not familiar with the story? Like you mean, like Dilf says, you mean you don't follow the lore outside of the movies and TV shows? Because I'm curious, because if you watch all that stuff, you know the story. The story is pretty simple. Max says, I don't have a deep understanding of the main story. Like, I've watched everything only once and very spread out. I'm in it more for the visuals. The story is not that deep. Again, the original Star Wars trilogy was made for the understanding of 12-year-old kids. George Lucas literally said, I'm making a movie that a 12-year-old boy would like, because he saw Star Wars as a passion project. It was to grab young boys in the same way that he was grabbed by the early like space operas when he grew up. When George Lucas grew up as a kid, he liked reading and hearing the radio broadcasts, because they didn't have TV. I mean, they had TV like by the 50s and stuff, but before the 50s, most people didn't have TVs. And so, you had these radio shows, and you had comics, and you had pulp fiction novels, and that was like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, stuff like that. That was the stuff that George Lucas grew up on, that heavily influenced Star Wars. He wanted us. It was Star Wars has always been a space opera, but he didn't want it to be a sprawling space opera like Star Trek was. Instead, Star Wars was supposed to be a family saga, akin to like something you see in a Japanese samurai movie, because he also was a fan of the Akira Kurosawa films. Akira Kurosawa over in Japan was making these these samurai revenge films, which were kind of based on American Western movies of the lone hero out in the West seeking vengeance for wrongs done to them. So the West modeled the East and the East modeled the West, sort of thing. And so it was funny, because since Akira Kurosawa was fancied the old westerns and put into his samurai revenge films, then later on what's been called the spaghetti western films, because this Italian director ended up making these movies with like Clint Eastwood, like the good, the bad, and the ugly, made these movies that sort of were like a westernized version of the samurai revenge films, which were also based on the old western movies. And both these spaghetti westerns and these samurai revenge films were modeled into Star Wars. You can clearly see the representation of the old Wild West on Tatooine in Star Wars, with Luke growing up in this barren place, and you can see the whole samurai thing with the Jedi and the Sith and all of that. Like Darth Vader's helmet is meant to resemble like a samurai helmet, and the armor. So in any case, it was not that convoluted, though. You don't need to know all of that backstory of what inspired George Lucas to make Star Wars, other than to say it was enough for a 12-year-old kid to follow. There's Jedi, who are these space samurai going out to correct the wrong, and they use the Force, which is similar to like understandings within Eastern religion about the use of like chi energy and harmony, stuff like that. It's not hard to follow. So if you watched all that stuff, it's not really hard to follow. And I really don't know anyone who just watches Star Wars for the visuals. I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you want visuals, you'd be better off just reading the comic books. But the visuals aren't like the visuals aren't going to sell the show. It still has to be good writing underneath it. To undergird any good show or any good movie, you still need good writing, and there's no good writing there in this new series. Crazy Muda says, "Yeah, I thought Lando was in malt liquor ads. I guess I mis. Yeah, you definitely misremembered that. Yes, Billy D. Williams was in malt liquor ads for Colt 45 back in the day. That had nothing to do with Star Wars. Star Wars was marketed to children and teenagers. They would not have been pushing malt liquor to kids. Not at all." Delph says, "Yeah, I got you. The new Star Wars trilogy was definitely eye candy, if nothing else. The, the best cinematography that came out of the sequel trilogy was The Last Jedi, which was also probably one of the worst movies. It's a it's a debate amongst fans which was worse, Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. I would say Rise of Skywalker was worse just because the story itself was incoherent. As much as I hate The Last Jedi, at least the story was coherent. I just didn't like how Ryan, whatever his name is, tried to destroy the original Star Wars um, mythos. But at least Last Jedi was a coherent story, and yes, the cinematography was spectacular, especially like when they were on the I forgot the planet where the surface is salt, and so when you had these speeders going across, it ionized it, turning it red. That was awesome visuals. Absolutely. I'll give you that, Max. I'll definitely give you that. The sequel trilogy had good visuals, particularly Last Jedi, which had probably the best. But again, it's they try to trick people with the superficial stuff to 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 like sort of like trick them into not seeing how bad it is. Like, oh look, a squirrel. Like that's what it is. Like they're trying to trick people. Like, oh look how good this looks. Okay, and hey, look, we got more cultural representation and diversity now. That's cool. But what's the story about? Well, and there you go. I do watch The Boys. Yeah. I might talk about that in another stream, but not today. But yeah, I watched The Boys. Kind of disappointed with the new season. Again, that's a topic for another day. Max says, which one is your favorite Southwest series to Dilford? I enjoyed the Boba Fett one a lot. You enjoy the worst stuff. I'm sorry, Max. You like the Acolyte and you like Book of Boba Fett. Most people do not like Book of Boba Fett. And I tried so hard to like it because Boba Fett is one of my favorite characters. And they messed it up so bad. And I even like the fact that they brought Luke Skywalker back again to do another deep fake. And they used Mark Hamill himself to do the deep fake. But that show was horrible. And if you talk about visuals, you can't even say that Book of Boba Fett had good visuals because it didn't. Like he literally had these teenagers that were like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in that fucking show. Like it was just bad, and like the choreography was bad. Like the little black kid who had the blaster and that he spun around and shot the guy. We were laughing so much at that scene. Like, are you serious? Like, what is going on here? Like, I was like, did Saban Entertainment get involved in this? Like, are we being punked? Is this Power Rangers? Like, what is going on? Like, if you want to claim visuals, um, Mandalorian visuals, cool. Even Kenobi had his points because I mean, at least they brought back Chris Hayden and Ewan McGregor for that show. So if you wanted to claim visuals, I can see Mandalorian and Kenobi, but Book of Boba Fett did not have good visuals. Like it seemed like they kind of their production budget kind of took a hit. Like you literally had a scene where they were trying to get across this gate, where instead of fighting the people there, they could literally just walked around it. I'm like, what? Like seriously? Difference is when it comes to new Star Wars, Max Headland, Rogue One, and Mandalorian season 1 and 2. Agreed. Agreed. Daryl says, huh, Lando's pansexual. Why do they think force feeding that into Star Wars is a smart idea? Because look at the people running it, Dilford. That's why South Park literally made an entire new series, a new episode when they made, uh, when they was making fun of Kathleen Kennedy. Put a chick in it and make her lame and gay. Like, that's what Star Wars has been doing for the last 12 years. Yeah, that's. And if you think I'm joking, you can actually go to the Star Wars website, or go to the interviews talking about Solo. And yeah, they made Lando Calrissian a pansexual and had him having a romantic relationship with this droid. And I remember because one of the other characters in the movie was asking the droid, she was like, a droid and a human? She's like, how does that work? She's like, oh, it works. I'm like, wow. And then it became sad because when the droid got killed, they put her memory into the Millennium Falcon. So the mind of the Millennium Falcon is actually that droid. So yeah, but yeah, someone thought they was being clever and it really wasn't. That was another series that was canceled. They were supposed to make a Disney Plus series just on Lando Calrissian, starring Donald Glover, reprising his role as Lando Calrissian from the Solo movie. But because again, people hated that version of Lando Calrissian so much, this show they never ended up making the show. But yeah, they were gonna make a spin-off Lando Calrissian Disney Plus series based on the version by Donald Glover, and Donald Glover's brother was supposed to be the showrunner. So because he's been talking a lot of trash saying that Star Wars just doesn't want a black gay director. I'm like, what? Excuse me? I was like, your brother literally plays a character who's a pansexual, and they've had a whole bunch of alphabet mafia in the new Star Wars. So his brother's sitting there claiming they just don't want a black gay showrunner. Doesn't make sense when they hire Leslie Hetland, a queer feminist woman who is now the showrunner for the Acolyte. So what Donald Glover's brother was saying didn't make any sense. But yeah, they were going to have a Lando spin-off Disney Plus series. They would say that if Lando had hints of him wanting to bang his droid in the original trilogy, then it would have made more sense to do that. But why? I don't know. Difference is if he would have directed another trilogy, Palpatine would have appeared again in every movie, right? J.A.C says, "Good afternoon. Glad to see the power back up." Yeah. So I explained that in the beginning of the stream. So we had our technician here that was doing our remodeling in the kitchen yesterday, and he needed to turn the power off. But whoever labeled the circuit breaker in our basement has everything in the wrong place. And so what he thought was hitting the kitchen ended up taking out all the power on the second floor. And so he flipped it and the power came back on, but then he flipped the wrong switch again, which knocked out the my internet router. So after he accidentally disconnected the internet router, I just ended the show because it didn't make sense to continue the streams. But I apologize for that. And I said to anyone if they still had any thoughts about anime, then if they want to talk about it here, that's fine. Aggressively relaxing says, I don't know if Yoda's on the High Council yet. I bet he is, but when we last saw him in the High Republic adventuring, no, he is. So, um, by this time in the High Republic, he still would have been a master, and he would have been set on the High Council because, remember, he would have by the time of the High Republic, he would have been 700 years old. He would have been since become a Jedi Master and gained a seat on the Jedi High Council. I don't know if he would. I don't think he was the Grand Master at the time of the High Republic, but he definitely had a seat on the High Council as of the era of the High Republic era. He was definitely known to have been in the Jedi High Council, but I'm not sure if he was the Grand Master at that time. That is the only thing I'm not sure. But he would have been there at that time. Kie Mundi or whatever his name is wouldn't have even been born. So there was no possible reason that he should have been on this new show, because this new show at this point in the show is 130 years before the Phantom Menace, and the guy was only known to be 70 as of the Phantom Menace. And again, his species doesn't live as long as humans. Humans can live up to 120 plus years, right? And there's like the Force doesn't really extend your lifespan so much as it makes you be able to be like just vital throughout your natural lifespan, because again, Jedi don't manipulate the Force for their own selfish ends. So they would a Sith Lord would definitely try to use the Force to extend their lifespan. That wouldn't be what a Jedi would do. So whatever is your natural lifespan for your species is the lifespan that a Jedi would have. So they can't use that, because if they try to use that, then they're gonna get skewered, because everyone who's a Star Wars fan is gonna point that very fact out. Difference says, did you ever watch the 2003 Star Wars Clone Wars with the 2D animation? That was one of my favorite shows, especially with new badass they made General Grievous. Yeah, the Tartakovsky or whatever his name is. He also was the one who made Samurai Jack. I like Samurai Jack, but I didn't like that goofy version of Star Wars Clone Wars. It looked horrible. It looked too goofy. And by that time, I wasn't even a fan of the prequel trilogy anyway, so I definitely didn't want to watch that spinoff. It looked horrible, because it wasn't really. It was made in association with Lucasfilm, but it wasn't made by Lucasfilm, so I didn't really like it. Now, there have been some elements from the 2003 Clone Wars that has been put into the Lucasfilm Clone War series afterwards, like General Grievous and all that sort of stuff. But and what's her name? The Count Dooku's apprentice. I can't remember her name. She was in. They brought her back for the Bad Batch, and they had to try to explain why she was still alive, because in the new novel, it explained that she had died, and so they had to explain why she was still alive in that episode of the Bad Batch that came out earlier this year. I forgot her name, but in any case, yeah, I didn't watch that version of Clone Wars, because it didn't look well. It didn't look well made. I don't like cheap animation. Cheap animation is the very thing that will keep me from watching something, which again was why it took me a long time before I actually got into watching One Piece, the anime, because I used to hate how it was drawn. Aggressively relaxing says, Sith are always masking their presence. I remember when I first got into Star Wars too. Yes, there's the rule of two. There's the master and the apprentice. They have it, and that's how they've made it through that millennium of not being seen. But again, if they actually had full-fledged fights with Jedi in the time of the High Republic, it would have been known to the Jedi in the late Republic era, before the fall, in the during the fall of the Republic. It would have been known to those Jedi at the time that Sith had appeared. They can't mass, like, there's a there's a force there's a force ability that allowed Palpatine to mask his presence amongst Jedi. That's not something that all Sith could do. He has been known to be one of the most powerful Sith Lords to have lived, aside from others like Darth Plagueis and Darth Revan and some of these other people, right? These are all like the most powerful Sith Lords that have ever existed. But again, they can mask their presence using that force ability, and again, not all Sith can use that force ability. However, once they actually get into fights and are killing people, killing Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters, like they literally killed the Jedi Master in the first episode of the Acolyte, this would have been known. Like this would have went into the records. Like the Jedi, there's an entire sect of the Jedi temple that records everything that has happened in the history of the Galactic Republic. This would have been known. Not to mention, if this person is going on a killing spree, not just killing one Jedi Master, but this person in the Acolyte, in the show, the Acolyte, is going on a killing spree of killing Jedi. This would not have been something that would have been hidden in the history of the High Republic by the time we get to the Phantom Menace. There's no way to square that circle. It's no way to square that circle. It would have been known that there was a dark side user who had been going around murdering Jedi and appeared to be a Sith Lord. Custody says, yeah, he was inspired by Flash Gordon. He was inspired by a lot of stuff. Custody, like, so he loved the space operas of the 30s and 40s, like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. There's a French comic book that inspired him too. Remember, they made a movie about that 7 years ago. That also inspired him. It's this French graphic novel called the city of a million planets, or something like that. The city of a thousand planets, whatever it's called. There's a whole graphic novel about that. There was a French graphic novel that inspired him. Then again, there was the spaghetti westerns and the Akira Kurosawa films that inspired him. That gave him his inspiration for the Jedi. The Jedi are basically the Jedi are a mixture of both samurai and medieval knights. Okay. So all that sort of stuff inspired him, and not to mention Dune. Can't talk enough about the novels written by Frank Herbert. The Dune. I mean, it was so much of it went into Star Wars that Frank Herbert almost sued George Lucas for plagiarization of his novel Dune. Like, we can see that Tatooine is obviously just another version of Arrakis. You have the spice trade in Star Wars, which resembles the spice trade on Dune. Even Jabba the Hutt is a representation of what happens to one of the characters by like the fourth Dune novel. There was Frank Herbert wrote like 6 Dune novels originally now, and his son has went on to write some later novels within the 2000s today. But back in the 70s, back in the 60s and 70s, he had wrote like 6 Dune novels, and a lot of that stuff went into Star Wars. So those are all the things that inspired George Lucas. There was his aggressive Me Too. I remember when I first saw episode 4 and was like, holy crap. So you've been watching it too, Dilford? I like I said, after Ahsoka was so bad, I refused to watch any more Disney Star Wars content. Like I said, the only way I will watch now is if they decided to do a Mandalorian season 4 and I'm undecided about Andor season 2. But if Jon Favreau is not connected to Mandalorian season 4, I'm not watching it, because he's literally like the only person in the franchise that I actually respect to like do a decent job. So he said, yeah, he was totally influenced by Kurosawa films too. Good shot. Oh hell yeah! So if you remember season 2 of Mandalorian, the episode called The Jedi, when they first showed the live action Ahsoka played by Rosario Dawson, and by the way, that's one of my favorite episodes of Mandalorian. That was just a huge that whole episode was just a huge shout out to Akira Kurosawa. Like the whole like the city was like supposed to be like a Japanese village. You even had these droids that they were like ninjas. Diana Lee Inosanto was like the big bad boss at the end, who used the I forgot the name of the metal that is impervious to lightsabers, to fight her with it. It was so good. That episode was so good. That's why everyone was looking forward to Ahsoka series, because we were like, well, hey, if they can just do one episode with Ahsoka and it's that good, then the show gotta be great. And then we get the show and we're like, yo, what happened to the quality that was in Mandalorian? It was completely gone. Um, and basically, it shouldn't even been called Ahsoka. It should have just been called Rebels, because it was basically just an extension of everything that happened in the Rebels show. So if you want if you weren't the niche group of Star Wars fans like myself, who had Disney XD and watched the Clone War Rebels to know what it was about, most people were lost about what was happening in Ahsoka. They didn't know who Sabine Wren was. They didn't know why they had to go find Ezra Bridger, who was now in another galaxy. They didn't know who Grand Admiral Thrawn was and why he was such a threat, because he was in the expanded universe. He was known to have been the like the most clever person in the Empire, like more so than probably the Emperor himself. But they made him a bumbling idiot in Ahsoka. Like he would mess things up, then excuse me, then he would just continuously say that, oh, that was my plan all along. Like, no, you fucked up and then just by accident happened to do something right and said that was my plan all along. Like he was a stupid person's version of what a smart person is. So yeah, but yeah, definitely that whole episode uh of of the Mandalorian that was called The Jedi. They showed Ahsoka. It even showed her little spirit animal that she had from the Clone Wars, the owl. That was just a huge love letter to Akira Kurosawa. Adam Maori says, hey bro, good morning from New Zealand. What's up, Adam Maori? So he said, hey. Kia ora ehoa. Thank you. I hope I said that correctly. I'm pretty sure I butchered that. I'm sorry. I know I probably butchered that completely. Adam already said Star Wars went woke. Yeah, it went woke since Disney. Like the whole reason that they bought Star Wars from Lucas was that it came with a built-in audience. And instead of tapping into that audience's love of Star Wars, they have sought to destroy it and expand from that built-in audience to a bunch of people who don't even like Star Wars. Like, let's be completely clear. People who are all about diversity for diversity's sake don't care about Star Wars, and they never have. There's definitely people, within that group of people who love Star Wars, but that's not part of their identity. Star Wars has never been part of their identity, but Disney thought it was clever for them to take both Marvel and Lucasfilm, who both have built-in audiences with their properties, which are mostly male, because Disney, let's be clear, has mostly a fan base of women and children. So they took these male-centered properties and then feminized them, and then want to gaslight the very audience that they wanted for not liking the stuff that they did. It is absolutely insane. Plus, you can't blame your customers for what they don't like. The consumer makes the choice. If they don't like what you're offering them, then offer them something better. But you can't sit there and blame the consumer for not liking a property that you put out to them that they don't like. Yeah, the boys did too. At a minority, we saw it over the last few seasons, but this season is the first 3 episodes of this season has made it completely blatant that the boys is just the showrunners' entire like hatred of everything they consider on the political right or conservative. So it was bad enough because the original comic book creator of the boys, Garth Ennis, hates superheroes, and so he made a whole comic book series showing superheroes as being the bad guys because he hates superheroes. Understood, I get that much. But now, not only do you have a hatred of superheroes, but then you malign superheroes and say that superheroes are a representation of the political right, and it's just like, come on now. It's like you're destroying some already good comic book series. Give me a second, guys. Sorry, I thought someone was at the door. But yeah, so you've already destroyed a good comic book series by interjecting a bunch of politics in it. So now it's not just enough that the superheroes are bad, but the superheroes are all a representation of American conservatism and of the extreme right wing. It's like, come on. They're messing up the boys, and I don't know if it's going to follow how it did in the comic book. So, spoiler alert, but possible spoiler alert, because most of what they're doing in the boys has nothing to do with what's been going on in the comic books. But Homelander in the comic book is supposed to take over the White House, but I don't know if the show is leading up to that, because currently in the show we have the soup who's pretending not to be a soup running for vice president with her running mate for office. So we'll see how this ends this season, but if it sticks to the comic books, then maybe they'll still show Homelander taking over the White House. But we don't even know, because like I said, they're trying to make everything Homelander is about be considered part of the MAGA crowd. And the MAGA crowd, again, whether you like them or dislike them, not all of them are evil. That's just insane. But yeah, I don't want to get too far from Star Wars, but yeah, that kind of rubs me the wrong way, that just like how Disney is messing up every property that was made for males, and then feminizing it, and then getting mad at those males for not liking the feminization of their most treasured properties. The boys is doing the same thing. Like, they're making everything in the boys political, and it wasn't supposed to be like that in the comic book. Danny says, hello bro, I'm from Indonesia. What's up, Danny? Zed says, what's up, man? What's up, Zed? Addison Z agreed big time. Yeah. Custody says, yeah, lesbian witches and the Acolyte is a shame. They don't even have the decency to nod to the nice sisters of Dathomir. So yeah, so like I was saying earlier, Custody, like, they're on Dathomir, but these are different witches. They're not the nice sisters. Now, In the expanded universe, there were other witches on Dathomir besides the Night Sisters, but they but the series doesn't even explain that. Like there should have been like some sort of like casual mention that hey, there were different covens of force witches that existed on Dathomir, and Night Sisters was just one of them. Um, but they didn't do that. I mean, if they weren't going to do that, they should have just used the Night Sisters. It didn't make sense to use a whole different bunch of force witches and then not even explain their presence on Dathomir, because it's going to confuse a lot of people. Because if you watch Ahsoka, the bad guy who they were chasing in that series was a Night Sister. So for most people, they would think those are one and the same people. So it just didn't make it. The show doesn't make any sense. Like it's obvious that the writers didn't know much about Star Wars when they wrote it, or just decided to ignore canon and just do whatever they wanted to do. Adam Mary says Acolyte Force, which is what a joke, right? Aggressively relaxing said, yeah, I have problems at the level of wokeness in this too. Everyone knows George would have gone harder. You all just love woke franchises. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Huh? They gave that quote to Cartman. The joke is they got you to identify with Cartman. Get it? No, so in the South Park thing, okay. So here's the thing about South Park. They make fun of both sides. That's what people don't get. Like, as much as they were making fun of Kathleen Kennedy, Disney, and Lucasfilm, they were also making fun of the people who's had such a huge reaction to the wokeness in Disney and Lucasfilm. So they're making fun of both sides. And people who... The issue is not everyone's clever enough to figure that out. But in South Park, the creators, Trey Stone and Matt, I forgot his last name, but they're making fun of both sides, clearly. But they also genuinely dislike the fact that they're just pushing, political correctness and identity politics in these franchises just for the sake of doing so. Like I said, no one cares when there's a lot of cultural diversity in a show or movie when it's well written. I can mention a bunch of shows that had diversity and stuff like that didn't distract from like when it becomes a distraction or when it's used in place of good writing, a good story and good acting, then it's a problem. And Lucasfilm and Marvel Studios is doing that. Like in their latest projects, that's why they suffer. People aren't, as much as they want to gaslight people and use fan baiting, people aren't stupid. They know when something isn't well written or well acted, and that they just basically try to sell you on diversity itself. It's like, no. It's like, I want a good coffee. Don't sell me on a brand of coffee. It still has to be good coffee at the end of the day. I don't care if it's from Starbucks or wherever. Like, is it good? So Deborah says, I can't wait until they decide to stop using him or her and start having characters use they and them, Zer, and all that other nonsense. Oh, they've already... So, if you've been watching, they've already started using the whole pronoun thing in this new show. The Acolyte has already been... tinkering with the whole pronoun usage in this new show. So, again... It's sad that I know so much about what's going on in the show and didn't even watch it just because I've been watching all the film critics talk about it. Like people like Critical Drinker. There's this great YouTuber called Thor Skywalker, and And by the way, he is not a hater. He gives a very balanced, nuanced view to everything that goes on in Star Wars. He has his own channel, and then he has one with his wife, and she's actually more critical of stuff than he is. So he gives a very fair and balanced view of what goes on in the Star Wars. But he is a fan himself, so he'll point out when he's disappointed with something. But he's willing to give every show a benefit of the doubt, whereas I'm not. So I'm not answering where am I from and stuff like that. If you're gonna ask about stuff that has neither anything to do with Star Wars or anything to do with anime from yesterday's live stream, which was prematurely cut off, I'm not answering your questions unless you want to drop a cash app. I've told you guys that, but some of you are retarded, and some of you think you can just do what you want, and it's not that way. This is not Burger King, bitch. Adam Iori says, um, us before the net, but still in uh, other technology can see crazy a lot easier than the young lot, and it's freaky and it's showing up here in New Zealand, and that's the other side of the world, guys. Oh yeah, I mean it's showing up in any westernized English-speaking country, so U.S., Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, all the English-speaking westernized nations is basically all the same poison, and it's showing up in other westernized nations that aren't even English-speaking, like France, Germany, the Netherlands, and so forth. No, so I'm gonna just jump in this random conversation you guys were having because Dilford is asking custody, so you saying what I should do is jump to the opposite hemisphere to avoid summers. Um, yes, but you don't jump from western to eastern hemisphere. You jump from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere. The reason of the seasons is the tilt of the Earth across on its rotational axis is tilted about 25 degrees or so. So half of the year the Earth is pointed in the opposite direction of the sun. The other 6 months is pointed in the direction towards the sun, which gives us our fall and winter and our spring and summer. So if you want to be somewhere warmer when it is colder, you need to go south, and vice versa, you go to the north. But if you live along the tropical region between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, it's generally going to be warm throughout the wherever you are on the globe, because you're within you're close. The Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn are closely to the equator. So anywhere lying along or close to the equator, whether in the northern or southern hemisphere, is going to pretty much be hot all year round. So just some random geography factoid. Yeah, the generative AI music is samurai music. It's like samurai meditation in cold water. Samurai meditation in cold winter, strong will, and not afraid of difficulties. So it's supposed to give you. It has that Japanese flute music. I can't remember the exact name of the instrument, but it sounds very calming. Progressively relaxes. I heard the legend about Monday too. Just the facts, please. So again, so the facts of Ki-Adi-Mundi, the Jedi Master, who appeared for the first time in The Phantom Menace until he was killed in the last movie, you know, the Revenge of the Sith. He was 70 years old at the time of The Phantom Menace, or at least 70 by the Revenge of the Sith several years later. I'm not sure if he was 70. I don't remember if he was I don't remember if he was 70 in the first movie or 70 in the last movie, but according to canon, he was 70, like when I would say when he died, okay? Um, and again, his species had not been known to live as long as humans. They are not as long lived. They don't have a long lifespan as humans do. So there's no way he would have been alive during the High Republic era, which was 200 years before the fall of the Republic. And this movie specifically takes place 130 years before the Phantom Menace. So he wouldn't even been alive. Plus, he was one of the very Jedi Masters sitting on the High Council who told everyone else that we have not known the Sith to have been around for the last millennium, 1,000 years. So they're just completely rewriting canon. And they can't, and this is why they're the lowest rated Star Wars property that has ever been made, lower rated than the Christmas special from 1978. That has been the most hated and reviled Star Wars property ever made, was the Christmas special. Okay. But until that was sitting at a 20% Rotten Tomato score. Now, as of last night, and I don't know where it is today, because it will move up and down, but the Acolyte was sitting at 14%. Custody says, yeah, here New Zealand can have all 4 seasons in a single day. I don't know about that. New Zealand seems like it's pretty chill. I mean, that's where they film the 3 Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movie. So it seems like it's tempered enough that it has reasonable weather. Davis is right. One Piece didn't get good animation until recently. Not sure how far you are in the series, but a lot of the animation in Wano is amazing. So I haven't watched anything from the second half. So the creator of One Piece said he was gonna make it 2 halves, and we're now in the beginning of the second, or the middle of the second half, which is still a long ways to go. But if you're watching it casually, like I did on like Netflix and so forth, like after they wrap up the last arc, when they tried to rescue Ace and he gets killed, then they have to rescue what's his name, Luffy, after Ace died, and he just like freaked out and all of that, like, and that arc ends. That's where they leave off, because apparently there's some sort of dispute over who owns the rights to those current episodes. So it was like about 550 episodes they skip, and you go right into the second half of One Piece. And so it's so much missing that I didn't want to just jump into it and see where Luffy and the rest of the crew are, because it didn't explain how they got back together, what happened since they got back together. All that stuff is missing. Plus, the stuff on Netflix was still in subtitles. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to jump into the second half and then be forced to watch it on subtitles when all the first 516 episodes that I watched so far have all been dubbed. So I'll just wait. The animation does look a little bit different, though. Gressly said, "Hey, I appreciate you nitpicking Star Wars with me. I'll subscribe. Can't wait for the next Kathleen Kennedy production. None of us here miss it." Well, so they have a bunch. It's an open. The movies that are supposed to come out are an open target because since since the failure of the sequel trilogy, they have announced and then denounced several Star Wars movies. There's still three that are still supposed to happen, but a lot of them got shut down. Like Ryan Johnson, who directed The Last Jedi, he was originally going to do a trilogy of movies because originally they thought that The Last Jedi was going to be such a success just because it made about $2 billion in the box office. However, people hated it and it completely divided the fan base. So they quietly took that away from him and then used the excuse that he was making other movies for other studios and didn't have the time to dedicate to Star Wars to make his trilogy. Then they were going to have Taika Waititi, the guy who did the Thor Love and Thunder and Thor Ragnarok movies. They were going to give him some stuff, but then people kind of reacted and said they don't really want him to do Star Wars because of his failure with the Marvel movies, doing Thor. That might not be the only reason. He might have just lost interest or something, but he's now not doing his movies. Then there was the producers from Game of Thrones. They were going to do it. They were going to do like a Dawn of the Jedi movie. Sounds familiar? You'll see why I asked that. But when they decided to make uh, the not the Rise of Skywalker, but I forgot what they were making. They felt like it took away from what they were going to do, so they kind of backed out of it. Of course, according to some, Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy just decided they didn't want to use them. There was a bunch of other directors attached as well. There was supposed to be another Mandalorian spin-off show, which was going to star Gina Carano, but when they fired her because of what she said about the LGHD TV crew, they decided to cancel the show. But that was supposed to be another spin-off Mandalorian show that starred Gina Carano, who was in The Mandalorian. And so far, the only movie we know that's currently in production is this new movie starring Rey Palpatine. I will not call her Rey Skywalker. She's Rey Palpatine. They're using her to build a new Jedi Order, and just by virtue of that fact alone, most people aren't going to watch it because we literally know that was what Luke was going to do and what he did do in the expanded universe. He literally created a new Jedi Order, and that new Jedi Order went on to fight these new villains, right? Hold on, guys. I need my charger. But yeah, so this whole new Rey movie is going to be about her building the Jedi Order. Nobody wants to see that. She's not a real Jedi. She's a Boken Jedi. A Boken is this. It's a wooden sword, which means Boken Jedi refer to like Jedi who are trained outside of the actual Jedi temple. And she I don't remember when she even gained her knighthood as a Jedi. To be honest, I'm guessing she just declared herself a Jedi Knight after the happenings of Rise of Skywalker, because there was a whole Lego Star Wars special with her training the black dude to become a Jedi in this Lego Star Wars Christmas special. And I'm pretty sure most people didn't watch that. I did watch it. Like I said, I'm a true Star Wars nerd. I even watched the bad stuff. It's just I refuse to do so anymore. But in the Star Wars Lego Christmas special, she's now a Jedi Master, or I don't know how, and she's training Finn. By the way, if people watched The Force Awakens, it was obviously that Finn was a Force sensitive. At in Rise of Skywalker, when he kept chasing around looking for Rey and yelling Rey, saying that he had something to tell her, most people assumed that he wanted to tell her that he was in love with her. That wasn't actually the case. He was supposed to tell her that, hey, I actually feel the Force. And because it was the movie was so shittily, was done so shittily, like it never came across correctly that he wanted to let her know that he was Force sensitive. But it was obvious from the first movie that it was something special about him. He was like a stormtrooper that was actually able to break his own brainwashing and realize what they were doing was wrong. That's why he refused to shoot those people in The Force Awakens. His Force sensitivity allowed him to get past the brainwashing that all stormtroopers are given from childhood. But yeah, it never came across well because the people who made those movies suck. But in any case, yeah, so I'm gonna nitpick the hell out of Star Wars. Custody says, yeah, this is the best Star Wars deep dive I've seen in a long while. Thank you. Thank you. And guys, you know I live it because, I don't keep pointing out all my little, toys here, but, Star Wars up the wazoo. By the way, that's not the original X-Wing that from the 80s. That's the Power of the Force X-Wing, which came out in the 90s because it was cheaper. And it's actually, I think it's colored better. But it's not the electronic one though. So I think there was an electronic X-Wing. That's not the electronic one. But it fits the same figures as the original Kenner's line because the Powers of the Force was then made by Hasbro, which had bought out Kenner back in the late 80s. But in any case, huge Star Wars nerd. Devil says, yeah, Contrarian really goes deep in whatever topic that he discusses. Bob Iger, Star Wars. The funny thing, a lot of people were mad at George Lucas a few months ago because there was a fight over CEO of Disney where they were trying to sue the biggest, some of the biggest shareholders, one guy being this guy Nelson something. They wanted to remove Bob Iger as chair, CEO of Disney because they were saying all the properties were really bad and the Disney shares had gone down. Like the stock has gone down a lot. And as one of the biggest shareholders, he was seeking to do a coup and remove Bob Iger as CEO. But George Lucas came out to protect him, which had everyone dumbfounded because everyone remembers the famous George Lucas interview 9 years ago when he went on the Charlie Rose show. Charlie Rose, is a journalist. You might see him on PBS, but he's like for like people who are really like nerdy into the news and journalism and stuff like that. Charlie Rose has been around a long time, and he went on this interview on Charlie Rose. And he called Disney white slavers that he sold, that he considered Star Wars his child because it was so personal to him that he felt like he made a mistake in selling his child to white slavers. That's what he called Disney. And he thought that Bob Iger betrayed him because once he had sold the property over to them, he thought they would keep him on as a creative consultant and follow, well, not as a creative consultant, I'm sorry. He thought that that part of the agreement when he sold Star Wars to them is that they would still use his ideas to make the sequel trilogy. Because the main reason he sold Star Wars to Disney 12 years ago is because he said at that time he was 69 years old. He said he knew that even though he had these ideas to do a sequel trilogy, that it would probably take him 10 years to complete the whole thing. And at 69, he said there was no guarantee that I was going to live another 10 years to finish making this sequel trilogy. So he said he wanted to sell it to someone under the proviso that they were going to keep his original ideas for the sequel trilogy. And after they bought it from him for like $4.3 billion, they decided to reject all of George Lucas' ideas for the sequel trilogy. Like I said, in the original ideas for George Lucas trilogy, he wanted to go into the force of these entities called the wills, which are sort of which was like these actual like sentient things that they were like a sentient representation of the force itself. So he wanted to go into this whole new thing that has never been seen before in Star Wars to explain how what the force actually was, like what these things were. These things called the wills actually created the force within the universe. He wanted to go into that, and he didn't want to bring back Emperor Palpatine as the big bad. He wanted Darth Maul to come back as the bad guy, as basically running a criminal empire that was taking over the entire galaxy at the time. They didn't use that idea. He definitely hated The Force Awakens. He said basically all he did was redo A New Hope. So it was kind of a surprise that he ended up backing Bob Iger to stay on as CEO of Disney. But I was telling people it kind of makes sense too, because part of that $4.3 billion deal that he got from Disney for Star Wars, not all of that was in cash. Half of that was in stocks. So he became a huge shareholder in Disney after the sale of Lucasfilm to them, because half of that deal was made not just in cash, but in stock, in Disney shares, rather. So he probably thought it was more stable for the company to remain under Bob Iger than for that guy Nelson, whatever his name is, to take over as the new CEO. But a lot of people were mad at George Lucas for that. But again, as a business, from a business perspective, I understand that he wants to keep the stability. However, it's still kind of weird, because under both Bob Iger and Bob Chapek, who had briefly been the CEO of Disney from like, I think like 2013 to 2014 up until like about 2021 or so, he kind of steered Disney in the way where it's been very like so much about identity politics and stuff like that. And Bob Iger has continued that, and it's like that has been killing off Disney stock. Like, if anyone who owns any sort of Disney stock has probably seen the trajectory of the value of that stock going down steadily over the last 6 years. So anyway, Custody says Favreau and Filoni are the only people who seem to respect the Star Wars roots. I disagree. Filoni is Fugazi. Like I said this in the you weren't in the stream earlier, but like I said, Dave Filoni has been misrepresented as being like the protege of George Lucas, and he's not. George Lucas himself said in an interview several years ago that he had no protege, that Star Wars started and ended with him, that he had trained no one to take on the reins of Star Wars when he was done with Star Wars. It would just be done when he was done with it. Again, that's before he sold it to Star Wars. I mean, sold it to Disney. But, he said, I have other people working for me on projects outside of the movies, like the Clone Wars animation series. But he said, I haven't taken on anyone to like, be my protege when I'm done with this. He said, when I'm done with this, that's going to be the end of Star Wars. And we see Filoni is not following a lot of George Lucas' original ideas, because like in that Cannes Film Festival just 2 months ago, George Lucas literally said like Disney doesn't understand any of his original ideas. and there's literally people in Lucasfilm that worked with him before he retired. Like Filoni was one of them. Kathleen Kennedy was an executive producer for him and Steven Spielberg for a long time. So they've all known what George Lucas' original ideas were, but they either rejected them or they never understood them. So I highly rejected Filoni has a deep respect for Star Wars. No, he doesn't. The new showrunner for the Acolyte, Leslie Headland, said that she was told by Filoni to take Star Wars in this new direction, and that she should use these lesbian force witches, because he said, well, the Night Sisters aren't the only force witches in Star Wars, there are others. So he just let her create her own breed of new force witches, who are now these lesbians who created twins out of the force itself, which is not something anyone can do. So I disagree that he respects Star Wars. Favreau, I think he does, but Filoni, no. Aggressively relaxing says, I still haven't seen any canon break, and if we're hanging our head on the Jedi archives, well, then I got a cloning facility on Camino to sell you. What are you talking about? That was the cloning facility on Camino is literally part of canon. I don't think you understand what the word Star Wars canon means. They have broken canon several times in this show, and anyone who's been on the stream for the last 2 hours has heard me describe every way they've broken canon. One, they created force twins. They created twin sisters out of the force. Force users cannot create life from the force, especially dark side users. There's never been a case of just like with J.R.R. Tolkien, when he described the differences in the different gods of Arda, which is Earth, in Lord of the Rings. The evil Vala, the Vala are the gods in the Tolkien myth. There's an evil Vala, which is basically like their version of Satan within the Lord of the Rings mythos. And he created these other species, but he could not create new forms of life himself. All he could do was twist what already existed. So in place of elves, he could take elves and then make a twisted version of them, which became the orcs, and so forth. Likewise, dark side users cannot create life through the force. They can only take something that already existed and twist it. When Darth Plagueis and his then apprentice Palpatine tried to create force from the force itself by manipulation of the dark side, they were unable to do so. And as a counter reaction to them trying to manipulate the force, to create life, the force produced life itself, which gave us Anakin Skywalker, who is the chosen one. So there has been no one else that has been born out of the force in canon Star Wars other than the chosen one himself, Anakin Skywalker. They broke that canon, number one. Number two, they don't understand the balance in the force. The balance in the force is not equal parts light side and equal parts dark side. The balance in the force, as explained by George Lucas himself, is the absence of the dark side. Balance in the force is absence of the dark side. Balance in the force is absence of the dark side. Balance in the force is absence of the dark side. You cannot make a moral relativization of force users. There's not both equal parts Jedi and equal parts Sith. That's not how balance in the force works. Again, another canon break. Third, This is the High Republic era. It's 200 years before the happenings of the Phantom Menace, when Darth Maul appears and is the first sighting of a Sith. But now we have a sighting of the Sith within the High Republic era, which is only 200 years before the appearance of Darth Maul and the Phantom Menace, where they literally state in canon everything that happens in the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy are canon. They literally state by Ki-Adi-Mundi that we have not seen Sith in a millennium. That means 1,000 years, which means it predates the High Republic. Third canon break. Fourth canon break. Ki-Mundi appears in the latest episode, but by the time he died in the prequel trilogy, he was only 70 years old. His species itself in canon Star Wars does not live as long as humans. For him to be 70 and his species is very old, it would be tantamount to being 100 years old in human years. But now he's a Jedi Knight in the High Republic era. He wouldn't have been born back then, because the happenings in this latest episode of the Acolyte takes place literally 130 years before the Phantom Menace. He would not have existed. So what you just said doesn't make sense. You obviously aren't a real Star Wars fan if you think that the Jedi Archives thing about the cloning facility breaks canon. That's literally a part of the canon. It's the part of the prequel trilogy. Anyone who's watched the prequel trilogy knows that. Custodes Expanded Universe has entered the chat. You don't even have to use the EU to explain why this show is so jacked up. You don't even have to use the EU. You can just go by the first 6 movies to describe why this show is messed up. You don't even have to go into the Expanded Universe. If I want to go into the Expanded Universe, which I have here and there, it doesn't help the case. The only thing the Expanded Universe does is say that there have been different Force witches on Dathomir besides the Night Sisters. But on the show, they don't even explain who these new witches are. Adam Mayori says they should let the Asians, no racism intended, do a series for dialogue and of course fight scenes, and I like to see one that starts from a dark side protagonist who's a good guy. I like to see it. Well, there's no such thing as a good guy dark side user. You can have a good guy, you can have a dark side protagonist. I mean, that's Anakin Skywalker. He was a dark side protagonist. But that person wouldn't be a good guy just by virtue of the fact that they're a dark side user. People who use their dark side are people who embrace being selfish. What leads you to the dark side is being selfish, that you have things that you want and things that you want to hold on to, and you're willing to do any and everything to either attain those things or to keep those things that you already have. So a dark side user, by virtue of the fact, will never be a good guy. Star Wars is a part of literary genre called science fantasy. It's a hybrid of science fiction and a hybrid of high fantasy. Being that it's a science fantasy, space fantasy, if you will, science fantasy has always been known for a clear divide between good and evil. And the fact that these showrunners and writers for this new show and these other Star Wars projects don't understand that shows they don't fundamentally understand Star Wars. It has always been a science fantasy, which has always had a clear divide between good versus evil. And so a dark side user by definition can't be a good guy. They can be the protagonist of the story, but they can't be a good guy. And there has actually been a lot of Asians involved in Star Wars because there's this Japanese producer who works on The Mandalorian. He actually plays a character on there. He plays this captain. So the old chubby Japanese guy, he's one of the producers. I can't remember his real name. Also, They did a whole Star Wars anime that's on Disney Plus called Star Wars Visions. That is all Japanese anime. So if you want to check that out, it's called Star Wars Visions. I didn't like the second season because the second season basically every person was a female, like, and I'm not even exaggerating at all. Every good character in the second season was a woman, but the first season was really good of Star Wars Visions. All of it is like anime. So if you're looking for something just made by Asian Asian creators, you'll like Star Wars Visions. It's anime and it's Star Wars rolled up into one. Um, Custody says I like 300 books that are now non-canon. Yeah, like, well, yeah. So all of that became legend. So it's like you can still read them, but now they're considered canon. As far as I'm, but even under the George Lucas, the expanded universe has always been like semi-canon. Like he always said, like, any of this stuff will be canon until he decides it's not, because he'll have different ideas for the movies than what was in the in the EU. Like before the prequels were made, there was a bunch of EU novels, and when the prequels were made, all of that stuff became non-canon. So that's no different than what George Lucas did, right? But then all the stuff that happened after the prequels had became like some of the most beloved stuff as part of the expanded universe content. But then all of that stuff that happened in the EU after the prequels, once it was sold to Disney, became non-canon except for like the video games. So only the video games, and I think it was only one video game at the time, one or two video games. There was one expanded universe novel that retained its canonization, and the six original movies. Those were the only things that stayed canon after Disney acquired the property. Aggressively relaxing. What are you talking about? I just explained to Custody, like the expanded universe hasn't been a coherent vision, because there was the EU before the prequels, which became non-canon. Then there was the expanded universe after the prequels, and then even then, George Lucas said that not all of this stuff is going to be canon. That um, there will always like it will always have like a quasi canonization to the EU novels and comic books, um, because it's only the movies, and this is what I'm taking from the movies. Aggressively relaxing. So I know what I'm talking about. And again, since I was actually born in that time and watched all of these things before George Lucas even edited the original movies, I know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to Star Wars. You weren't even living then, so don't try to correct someone who actually lived the time. Those six movies are considered canon by both George Lucas and by Disney Star Wars. So by their own definition of what is canon, they broke canon, because none of the stuff that I just quoted that broke canon had anything to do with expanded universe. I'm talking purely from the six movies, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. That is it. They broke canon by their own definition of what is considered canon. And while we're talking about expanded universe, I think the Dark Horse probably had the best comics and stuff, the best comics and graphic novels that came out of the expanded universe era. The Marvel stuff that was in the 70s and 80s was very wild. And a lot of that stuff took place before the prequels was made. So none of the stuff that was made by those original Marvel comics back in like 78 up until like 80 something, none of that stuff was considered canon by the time the prequel trilogies happened. but it's a fun read if you just want to see like the history of like early Star Wars before George Lucas kind of cemented his ideas that became the prequel trilogy. Adam, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Twin Brothers, and we can talk about it because it's not a spoiler alert for the TV show, because the TV show decided to go on a completely different end than the comic books. And you're talking about Homelander and Black Noir. Um, they're not actually twins. Noir, Black Noir was actually a clone of Homelander. So in case something ever happened to Homelander, they had someone to carry on in his place. But no, they weren't twins. They were Black Noir was a clone of Homelander in the boys. Dove says also you have more than 300 each. I have the Star Wars Legacy comic series and a few others, but nothing like yours. Who has more than 300 comics? I know you're not talking to me. It must be someone else in the stream. In the chat, I don't see it, but yeah, I don't. I was just talking about how expansive the expanded universe was, because you have the expanded universe starts with the Marvel comics from the 70s, right, from 1978 on to like the late 80s when that run stops. And then you have those three novels that happen right, and then you have those three novels that happen right after the happenings of Return of the Jedi, that again are prior to the prequel trilogy, which is the heir of the Empire and all that sort of stuff, which is gives us the first time we hear about Grand Admiral Thrawn and about his species, and about this war that's going on between his people and these other people coming from outside of the galaxy. All of that stuff was the early EU stuff that happened before the prequel trilogy. By the time the prequel trilogy happened, everything that happened prior was done. That was done. None of that stuff was canon anymore. So then you had the prequel trilogy, and then you had that uh, Tartovsky or whatever his name is, the guy who did Samurai Jack. He did that 2003 run of Clone Wars, which only lasted a season, I believe, and it was. Some people like it, some people don't. I was one of the people who didn't like it because it looked goofy. But then afterwards, you had the the Clone War movie, which was that the CGI movie, which first introduced us to Ahsoka and Anakin taking on the Padawan and all that sort of stuff. That movie came out in I don't remember, was it 2000? Because Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005. Um, I'm gonna say it came out in like 2008. I think it was 2008, and either 2008 or 2006. I can't remember. But then right afterwards, that's when they did the Clone Wars series. Um, and so all the stuff from that, then they created a new expanded universe based on the stuff coming from the prequels. And then a lot of that people consider it was canon, but again, George Lucas himself never considered the EU itself canon himself. He said some of it is canon, some of it isn't. He said it just depends on where, if he decides on using it in the future. And then, like I said, then you jump to 2012 when he sells Disney's his Lucasfilm, and they start making their own stuff in 2013. They start making new comics, and now it's no longer Dark Horse doing it, but it's now Marvel that regain the rights to make the comic books, and then they actually reprint a lot of the stuff from Dark Horse under the Marvel imprimatur. Um, but yeah, so the EU has always been like a mixed bag. Jennifer said, just because Disney said the Star Wars EU is not canon doesn't make it true. I refuse to believe. Yeah, I mean at this point you have a divide. Like you clearly have like the George Lucas Star Wars fans and you have Disney Star Wars fans. And the George Lucas fans are much larger than the Disney Star Wars fans. And some are both. Some of us are both. Some of us like some of the stuff that came out of Disney, but not everything. Like I still love Rogue One. That was great. I like the new comic book run they did um up until recently. Like I like everything. I like the Star Wars Marvel stuff that came out up until they started the High Republic era. Like most people didn't like the High Republic era, and I actually had that comic book because it was actually promising when it first came out, but a lot of people didn't like it. But the stuff they had up until they made the High Republic era comic books was pretty good, and that came out back in 2021, something like that. The Tales series is not canon. Aggressively relaxing. That's what I keep telling. Like the, the, the Tales of the Sith, like that has nothing to do with George Lucas. So you can hunch your shoulders all you want, but you're just cherry picking stuff against someone who actually knows more about Star Wars than you ever will. You're cherry picking stuff. The whole Tales of the Empire stuff. Again, I'm talking about stuff that happened that predates that. And again, you're not disagreeing with me. I literally confirm what you already said. Maybe if you um, concentrate on what I'm saying instead of just looking to counter everything I'm saying, you would have heard me say over 3 times that there are other force witches beside the Night Sisters on Darthamir, and that comes from the expanded universe itself. However, on the show, they did not describe who these new witches are. That's what I have said numerous times. So we can just be willfully ignorant, I guess. So, all right. Custody says Disney says it's all non-canon, then takes Thrawn. Yeah, so they say everything is non-canon, right, Custody, and then they'll literally just take stuff here and there, and then recanonize it, but they'll just do a bastardized version of them. So they took Thrawn from the Heir of the Empire, not trilogy novel that came out back in like the 80s, which was supposed to be a continuation of the story of Luke and everyone else, Luke, Leia, and Han, after the events of Return of the Jedi, where it shows Luke, you know, restarting the New Jedi Order, Leia becoming a Jedi Knight, um, her and Han having a family and all this sorts of stuff. Um, but that like they brought back Thrawn even before that. They brought back Thrawn in the series Star Wars Rebels back in 2013. The last 2 seasons, I believe, he was in, and he was supposed to be like this mastermind because he was like this mastermind in the novels. He was like the smartest person that was part of the Galactic Empire. But in the series, like he was supposed to be clever, but everything he did wasn't that clever, and he was even worse in the Ahsoka series because in the Ahsoka series, he just kept he just kept failing up. Like he would make a mistake, and then he would do one thing that was right, even though he actually messed up, and then say, "Oh, well, that was my plan all along." I'm like, come on, dude, this is crazy. I'm like, this guy's not clever. Like he's supposed to be like a mastermind, and this dude keeps failing and just happened to do one thing that was right and then say, oh yeah, that was my plan all along, to make all these series of mistakes just to divert them from the actual thing I wanted to get done. Like, no, you didn't. Like I said, the way they wrote Thrawn in the Ahsoka series was a stupid person's version of what a brilliant person is. I mean, the problem with bad writing is that clever characters can only be as clever as the people who write them. So the writers aren't that smart themselves. They don't have the ability to write in clever characters. in the things that they're in the things they're talking about. Yeah, Thor Skywalker is a YouTube channel. That's the person's name, Thor Skywalker. He gives a pretty good balance on all Star Wars related content. And he has a second channel by his wife. She's actually way more critical than Thor Skywalker. 3 dislikes and 1 like. I've literally said what I thought about it. I'm not going to continue. I'm losing my voice. You can look back at the earlier part of the video. I mean, I think from context you can see what my opinion is. Custody says I prefer Dune. It's better desert trilogy. Well, I mean, like I said, Star Wars stole a lot from Dune. Let's just be honest. It's George Lucas stole a lot from the writer Frank Herbert, who wrote the original 6 Dune novels. Apparently, they're going to be making a 3rd movie based on the 2nd novel, Dune Messiah. So I'm looking forward to that. And it's like almost a given that they will make another movie, given how the first 2 movies based on the first novel were very successful. So they're going to do Dune Messiah. So that's one of the books I need to read before they make the new movie. All right, someone is about half a second from getting banned. Again, I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm not making things up. I literally watched the prequel trilogy X amount so many times. He was an old man as a Jedi Master sitting on the High Council. There's no way he would have existed 130 years prior in the High Republic era in this new show. He wouldn't have existed back then. Nor would and if he did exist at that time, then he would have himself have known that the Sith were still around. At that time, they thought the Sith weren't around anymore because they hadn't seen them in 1,000 years. If he was alive at that time, which he wasn't, but if he were, he would have told the High Council, yeah, we need to be worried because it looks like the Sith are coming back, because we remember seeing them when they were killing off our Jedi Knights back 130 years ago. Custody says Kid Fisto was cooler than Mundy. Well, yeah, he was. But I mean, they're completely different species. I can't remember if it was Kid Fisto or some other Jedi Master. His species was like the only one allowed to get married as Jedi Knights, and it'd be allowed because literally like the survival of their species depended on it, because there weren't that many of them or something like that. So he was the one like alien Jedi Master who was allowed to like marry, and I think he had like two or 3 wives. I think 2. All right, you're gone. I already warned him, guys. I told him he was gone if he kept going. Like, you're not gonna sit there and keep telling me I'm wrong when I literally know what I'm talking about. Like, he's clearly here just to troll. So aggressively relaxing is banned from my channel. This guy is gone. I don't know who the fuck Jamal Hill is, but I'm tired of seeing that, so he's banned. Custody said Misa think Lucas make right choice, step away. Custody says nobody can ever justify Jar Jar to me. Same here. Jar Jar was, a lot of people hated Jar Jar because it was obvious like he was like trying to speak a don't know what went on out there, but anyway, he was obviously trying to speak some little so-called like West Indian, Caribbean type uh, Creole or pidgin language, and it just came off very buffoonish. Unfortunately, the actor who had nothing to do with this, Ahmed Best, who played Jar Jar, was harassed so much online back then that he almost deleted himself. So one of the things I did enjoy about season 3 of The Mandalorian was that they gave him a new role as a Jedi Master, and this was the Jedi Master who saved Grogu during Order 66. I loved that part. That was the only part of Mandalorian season 3 that I loved, that Ahmed Best came back down as a Jedi Master, and that he answered the question that everyone had from season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, which was who saved Grogu from the temple during the Order 66 siege. It was he who saved it, and that was like a pretty badass part of The Mandalorian of season 3. That's the only part of season 3 I loved. But you had this, but that was like the height of season 3 of The Mandalorian. The very low is when they had that bitch Lizzo on that show. I'm like, why is Lizzo on the show? So yeah, if y'all didn't know, yeah, Lizzo was on season 3 of The Mandalorian. She wasn't a Jedi, but she was like a fucking princess. And yeah, yuck. I would pick Jar Jar over Lizzo. That's how much I dislike her. Custodes says, nah, Clone kicked ass with the Clone War series. Did he? But he was under the direct tutelage of the time at George Lucas. He didn't do that stuff on his own. Like everything that was going on under Clone Wars and stuff was like was through George Lucas oversight. Except for the last season, they made that last season. So there was 2 seasons that came after the end of Clone Wars. So there was the season called the Lost Season, and the first time that appeared was on Netflix. Netflix aired when Netflix had temporarily acquired Clone Wars, like uh, like 6 years ago, 5 years ago. They showed what was called the Lost Season, which showed what happened when Ahsoka was blamed for the killing of another Jedi, and she was being hunted and had to prove her innocence, and she ended up leaving the Jedi after she proved her innocence, but she was so scarred in how they had treated her that she just abandoned the order, and they had granted her, and she abandoned it, even though they had the masters of the High Council had granted her knighthood for saying that her going through proving her innocence were going to be her Jedi trials, and that her proving her innocence was the equivalent of passing the Jedi trials. But instead, she said she didn't want it. That was the Lost Season. And I don't know whether the Lost Season was made under Lucas or not, but the very last season they made specifically for Disney Plus. It was good, but too much of the focus was on Ahsoka, and that was Dave Filoni, because the focus was never on Ahsoka. That was all Dave Filoni's doing throughout all the original seasons of the Clone Wars. It was about the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. It was Dave Filoni who took the last season and made it all about Ahsoka. So he's not that talented. And I'll go down swinging saying that Filoni was not the greatest part of Clone Wars. It was George Lucas who was the greatest part of the Clone Wars, because he had direct oversight of everything that happened on the show. When he no longer had oversight of what happened on the show, that's when Filoni stepped in that last season and made it all about Ahsoka. Custody said, yeah, the whole twins created from just the Force is like a badly rewritten Luke and Leia. It is also stolen art from one of the novels that was laughed at even in the 90s. Yeah. Hezzy Jim said, "Oh, he dead ass talking Star Wars." I am. Custody says, "Yeah, Star Wars all up in here." He said, on top of giving us Star Wars, the best thing George Lucas did was give us fans free reign to play in the sandbox. It's just a shame some people at Disney are being paid to shit in that sandbox. Yeah, they literally so I've only been talking Star Wars, but every project under Lucasfilm, Disney has destroyed. They destroyed Indiana Jones. They destroyed it. They destroyed Willow. I love Willow. Willow has always been a niche audience, but the people who like Willow really love Willow. I have my Willow action figure as well, guys. So I loved Willow. Um, Definitely loved Indiana Jones. And again, here we go again. Got my little Willow guy right here. Got my Dr. Jones right here. This was made by Kenner. And so his first move, George Lucas' first movie was THX, which is what he made the name of his of the system he did for all the sounds and effects for his movies. He named it after his first movie, THX. His second movie was a movie that was like a love letter to the 50s culture. It's called American Graffiti, and it stars like a young Ron Howard, a young what's the guy who's from Indiana Jones? Hamill, not Mark Hamill. What's his name? But there's a young version of him. A bunch of people. So it seemed like that's where Happy Days might have been based off of American Graffiti, but that was like his second movie. It's an underrated cult classic, I think. I think that was made in 75, 74. But under George Lucas, he has a producer credit that extends to about 200 movies. So not just Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Willow. He has like producer credits for like about 200 or so movies. And then it may be way more than that. People might remember Howard the Duck. He made that movie. Some might remember Michael Jackson, Captain EO. There used to be you could only see it back at Disney World at the time. But Captain EO was made by George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and directed by freaking by George Lucas' mentor. What's his name? God, what's that guy's name? Italian name. Can't remember. But all those people were connected to Captain EO back in the day. And of course, George Lucas' first wife had a lot of input in the original trilogy too. A lot of people think that she kind of was the part that was missing from the prequel trilogy. Why the prequel trilogy wasn't as good as the original, because it didn't have the input of his wife, who ended up cheating on him, and whose mentor his film mentor tried to actually have an affair with her. I think she rebuffed him, but she did end up having an affair with someone else. You can kind of see that playing with Anakin. Like Luke and Anakin have always been like sort of a representation of George Lucas. So or what he was going through. A lot of people don't understand that. I mean, it should be kind of obvious. George Lucas, Luke Skywalker. So, but anyway, guys, I'm about to wrap this up. Um, Francis Ford Coppola, that's what I'm thinking about. So Francis Ford Coppola was sort of like a mentor towards George Lucas. However, he did try to hit on George Lucas' wife at the time, which is why they had a falling out. I think they since mended their fences long time ago, but they had a falling out that lasted a long time, and you kind of see that being played about in the prequel trilogy, where Anakin starts believing that Obi-Wan wants to take Amidala, Padme Amidala from him, stuff like that. So you see some of that playing out. And again, like I said, all three of those phenomenal filmmakers came to work on Captain EO with Michael Jackson, Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg. So obviously they amended their fences later. And some people know that Nicolas Cage is actually the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. It's just that when he went into Hollywood, he decided to not use his real last name because he didn't want it he didn't want it to be a nepo baby. Before the term nepo baby had even came about, he didn't want it to be like other people in the industry who had became famous because of their last names already being known in Hollywood. Like Michael Douglas was the son of Kirk Douglas, with Jamie Lee Curtis being the daughter of I forgot who her mother was, but a really big actress, and a bunch of other people in the business. Ben Stiller being, you know, the son of the uh, the other Stiller guy, the guy who plays Costanza's father in Seinfeld. Like a lot of nepo babies. So Nicolas Cage decided he didn't want to be known as one of those people who became famous because of his last name, from his uncle Francis Ford Coppola. Another little nerdy factoid. Custody said free Alderaan. Can we have a moment of silence for Alderaan? Okay, there we go. Fortunate one seems to be having a an airborne ranger moment. Obi J is Goat says I love Star Trek. That's cool, but we're not talking about Star Trek. We're talking about Star Wars. I do love Star Trek as well, but not talking about that today. Top 1% is watching from Mumbai. OGB is Goat. We're talking about Star Wars, so. Custody. Actually, Greedo didn't shoot. You said Greedo. You meant Han shot first, right? The funny thing is, so I know this is an aside, but it's funny. So everyone who's like a fan of the original Star Wars movies before they were um, re before George Lucas remastered them and added extra scenes and changed the interaction between Han and Greedo um, at the Mos Eisley bar, will say that Han shot first. However, that's actually incorrect because everyone always says Han shot first. It wasn't that Han shot first. He was the only one who shot at all. That was what was changed, was that George Lucas said he didn't want, the person that Leia fell in love with to have been this scoundrel. So he changed it from Han just blatantly killing this guy who was threatening him to having him shoot as a reaction to Greedo shooting at him. But in the original the original theater release of 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 A New Hope, Han was the only one who shot. Greedo never got a chance to shoot because as soon as he threatened Han just shot him. So it wasn't Han shot first. He was the only one who shot. So all the serious Star Wars nerds will remember that Greedo never even got a shot off before they re-edited the film to make it look like he shot, and then Han shot as a reaction. He never got shot off. Han was the only one who shot because he was just like he didn't give a shit. I'm not explaining the Star Wars and Star Trek difference. If you don't understand that, you're either not American or you need to bone up on that. You're talking two different properties. Chris says, much love from South Carolina. What's up, Chris? Custodian said, yeah, agreed. That was a cool thing to let Jar Jar actually be a Jedi savior. Yeah, he played the role. Plus, also, he has been playing that same character at one of the Disney resorts. I think where the Disney resort where they have the Star Wars part of the amusement park. They have, in that part, he actually has been playing that part for a long time for kids for the last couple of years. So they actually got to let him take that part he's been playing in the Disney resort and play it on film. So again, I highly like that because he deserved that after going through all the hatred he went through playing Jar Jar. Like, that's another thing. Don't blame the actors for the decisions of the filmmakers. They have nothing to do with it. So, as much as most of us hate the sequel trilogy, I don't think anyone hates the actress who plays Rey Palpatine. She had no decisions. She made no decisions in how the movie was to portray her character at all. So even if her character was a Mary Sue type character, it's not her fault. So no one blames the actress who plays Rey Palpatine. I can't remember her real name right now, but every time you see her in an interview, she is one of like the sweetest people. And just like the black guy who plays Finn, like people don't like his character, but he did nothing wrong. He did, and he even said that on Twitter once before. He was like, guys, he said, if you have a problem with the movies, he was like, take that up with the decision makers. He was like, we as actors are not the decision makers. And like they even chased that little Asian girl off of social media because they harassed her so much about her part in The Last Jedi. First of all, I had no problem with her character. I mean, maybe because I'm biased and I love Asian women, but that's an aside. But even still, even though her and Finn had this whole little side quest that went on in Last Jedi that people hated, that's not her fault. She was not a decision maker. It became so much so that in the third and final installment of the sequel trilogy, they dwindled down her role to like basically nothing, and that was no fault of her own. The decisions they took with her character. So I will never hate an actor for the part they play in a movie when they had no decisions in the part of them of playing that character. And like I said, that definitely goes for Ahmad Best, who almost committed suicide because of the online harassment he got for playing Jar Jar Binks back in '99, 2002, and then later 2005, Revenge of the Sith. And of course, some people thought that the character was so bad that it was intentionally so, and that he was secretly a Sith apprentice. That has been like a long myth amongst Star Wars fans. There's this, this online myth that Jar Jar was secretly a Sith apprentice, but he's not. Custody says I really enjoyed the Young Indiana Jones TV series show in the 90s. That's on Disney Plus right now. So they worked out some sort of deal with Paramount that they have all the Indiana Jones content now on Disney Plus. So if you want to see Young Indiana Jones, they have that series. I remember watching that too when it first came out in the 90s. I think I only watched like maybe the first 2 episodes. I didn't really like the show that much. But um you can watch the entire series on Disney Plus now. Yeah. Yeah, so Lucas, Spielberg, and Francis Ford Coppola all were were all involved in Captain EO. Um, you can find Captain EO on YouTube, I think. Still, go on there and look up look in the film credits. You're gonna see George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, all these folks. Yeah, all of them were involved in Captain EO, and you can kind of see this how George Lucas was involved because it's literally like it's supposed to be like a little space opera type thing going on. The aliens, I think the aliens were made by Jim Henson. Don't get me, don't misquote me, but I think Jim Henson's Creature Shop made the aliens for Captain EO too. So you got all the best and brightest people coming together because freaking Michael Jackson was the king of pop. He made a movie, so everybody jumped on ship and helped out. Let me look that up. Oh no, okay. So Henson was not involved in Captain EO, but he did recommend the puppeteer who ended up working for the movie. But yeah, um, but yeah, it was definitely Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg who were involved in that. Yeah, and Nicolas Cage is Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. He never used his real name when he went into Hollywood because he didn't want to be known as he didn't want to be known as just someone who was there because of his family connections, or as we call it today, a nepo baby. CJ Johnson says, "Happy Juneteenth. You doing anything special?" Not particularly, but I think I'm going to do a live stream later this evening on Juneteenth. I'm gonna kind of get a little political about it, so just a warning. It's not going to be as lighthearted as this discussion is. But to be honest, I don't know how you celebrate Juneteenth other than like a cookout, maybe. So, no, I'm sorry. There's no shout outs, preppy girls, unless you leave in the Cash App. Because too many people think they're clever by trying to give me a name that obviously once you pronounce it is something sexual to, and they think they're funny. And these people who do these sort of things are stupid and don't realize that I grew up in the era of The Simpsons where we remember every episode when Bart Simpson called Principal Skinner and tried to get him to say their name out loud so that everyone would laugh. Like, you can't fool a Gen Xer. We know all the tricks that you guys do. So if you do got if anyone wants a genuine shout out, they can drop a Cash App. That way I know it's sincere. If you're not, if it's sincere, you'll drop like, and Cash App can, all you need for a Cash App is at least $1. So um if it's genuinely worth a shout out, then you'll drop a Cash App, whether it's $1 or $2, whatever. And CJ Johnson said, just ducking your head from all them strays. Custody says, nah, bro, please don't put that on me. I was joking about Greedo shooting first. No. I know you were joking. I know you were joking because when you said Greedo shot first, I knew you were joking. no, what I would what I was saying to you um was that when you know how everyone now has become popular say Han shot first, and you even see people wearing t-shirts saying Han shot first. And I'm like, guys, have you even watched the movie before it was remade by Lucas? Because I said he didn't shoot first. He was the only one who did shoot. So it's so funny that that whole thing has come out saying Han shot first. I'm like, no, he was the only one who shot. But in the remake, they actually show Greedo shooting, and then Han just sort of just goes like this, and then shoots him. And I'm like, wait, what? That does that doesn't make him a nicer guy just because he waited for the guy to shoot him, and then he ducked a laser blast and then shot back. Darth Jar Jar, yeah, like this huge online room about the whole Darth Jar Jar myth. It's actually pretty. It would actually be pretty funny, but there's like fan fiction out there about that. But it's never the fan fiction has never been incorporated into legends or into the comics. Custody says that's so cool. I think Farscape was the pinnacle of TV sci-fi, but I'm biased. I haven't watched it, but that I think Farscape and all that stuff was like sort of like the height of the sci-fi channel at the time. Like that that late 90s early 2000s era of the sci-fi channel, I think, was like the height of the sci-fi channel. I don't really know what they do now because I haven't watched it since I don't really watch cable that much anymore, every once in a blue moon. But during that, when people were still watching cable, I think that was when Farscape came out. I think that was like probably the highlight of the sci-fi channel. I never watched it though, because sci-fi did lots of. They had Farscape. They did the remake of Battlestar Galactica, which a lot of people like, but I only watched the original Battlestar Galactica. Um, then they did a remake of Dune. Before the current remake, they did a remake of Dune that most people don't like, from what I understand. I didn't watch it, but I've heard people say it's not very good. I watched the original Dune '80s movie back in the day, but didn't watch the Sci-Fi Channel remake. But that all of those three properties came out during, like, I think Sci-Fi was like at the top of their game. I don't know what they're doing now. Before they changed it to SYFI. But guys, I'm about to go. Don't quote me on this, but I'm gonna try to come back later this evening and talk about Juneteenth or something like that. But I don't have any thoughts on it right now. But I am going to get ready to get out of here. Still sunlight, and trying to dodge that sun, because going running around in the summer sun, even though it's not officially summer, but it practically is. But running around in this heat is sort of like being Super Mario on the levels where the the desert levels where the sun chases Super Mario as he's running across the board. That's what it feels like when you're a runner when it's hot. It feels like you got the sun chasing you across the little desert level of the Super Mario brother games. That's what that shit feels like. So I'm gonna go. Unless there's a few more comments or questions about Star Wars. I'm gonna let this one guy come back. He was just getting on my nerves. I'm gonna unhide him, but um, I had to kind of mute him for a minute. Because I don't like people spreading. One thing people will not do on my channel is spread misinformation. To me, spreading misinformation is the same as trolling. The only difference between trolling and spreading misinformation is one is intentional, the other one is unintentional. But I can't even tell if it was unintentional with him, because he kept like flying in the face of facts that are easily accessible by anyone with an online device. You can clearly go to the Star Wars website, the Star Wars data bank. You can go to any of the information about the history of Star Wars films. and see and verify everything that I was saying. You can go to the film critics who are fans of Star Wars and verify the information I'm saying. None of it requires a deep dig into the expanded universe, which is a very wide breadth of projects. The EU expanded universe, which is now called Legends by Disney, is a collection of comic books, both Marvel and Dark Horse, novels written by different writers who were approved of by Lucas, video games that were approved by Lucas. Like they even have a brand of Lucasfilm that's just dedicated to video games. I think it's called Lucas Arts. Um, and not to mention TV shows that are not now no longer considered canon, like the Christmas special from 1978, the Ewoks movies 1 and 2 that came out on ABC network back in the 80s, the Droids cartoon, the Ewoks cartoon. Um, there was another project that came out prior to the prequels, and then after the prequels, then you had like the the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series. Then you had the Clone Wars animated movie. Then you had the Clone Wars animated series. Then you had a few more video games, and all that was prior to Disney taking over. So, and another novel which still is considered canon in Disney. That's a wide breadth of the expanded universe. One of the expanded universe stuff that I have, which I still consider canon, is actually called the Jedi. The Jedi Path. There's also one written for the Sith, but this one is written for like how people become Jedi. It's a very cool book to have. And I also have the official novelization of the film that came out in 1976. So for those who don't know, the Star Wars movie, the original movie, was actually pushed back. It was actually supposed to come out in 76, and George Lucas had his novel Ghost written for him back in 1976. So it actually came out about 6 or 9 months prior to the actual movie. I think that more or less is still considered canon, since it's an official novelization of the movie. So I think it's canon, but I'm not sure. In any case, guys, I'm gonna go, and if you have any further questions, leave it in my comments section, and I'll catch it. Again, if anyone still had any questions from yesterday from the anime live stream, you can leave those comments too, because I did say earlier on in the stream that for the folks who got cut off from me yesterday when we were talking about anime, that I will still answer questions about that. Oh, and then someone said they wish they would see more Asian filmmakers involved in Star Wars. And I said there actually is. There's one guy who's been important in all the Mandalorians stuff, who actually plays a small role in the Mandalorian as a captain in the new Republic Army. But also there's an anime series on Disney Plus. It's not canon, but it's a Star Wars anime called Star Wars Visions, and each episode is made by a different anime studio. So it's all anime Star Wars. So if you want to check that out, Star Wars Visions. I'll warn you, the second season isn't good. The first season is the good one. The second season is all about like feminism. So if that's okay with you, be forewarned, you can watch both seasons, but only the first season to me was good. Star Wars Visions. Then there's Tales of the Empire, which is another animated thing. As far as I know, Tales of the Empire isn't canon, but Disney hasn't really come out too strongly on whether it's canon or not canon. It's Tales of the Empire to get sort of the beginnings of some other characters like a young Count Dooku, a young Ahsoka before she joins the Jedi Temple. And now there's a new one called I think it's called Tales of the Sith or Tales of the Empire. They give like background to some of the dark side users. And again, I'm not sure if this is considered canon or if it's just more like Star Wars vision, which is just people being able to like make interpretations of these characters. But there you go. Again, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. There are much bigger Star Wars nerds than I am, but the guy who tried to challenge me aggressively relaxing doesn't know half of what I know when it comes to Star Wars. But I did let him back in. I unhid him from the channel so he can come back on a later date if he wants to contribute without trolling. Because somebody says, yeah, LOL, running from the angry son, have a great day, bro. That's what it feels like. Dover says, have you ever been to Letterman Digital Arts Center in San Francisco? It's the HQ of Lucasfilms. I went a few months ago, but they were closed at the time. No, I thought the Skywalker Ranch was the headquarters of Lucasfilms. Isn't it Skywalker Ranch? Or at least it was Skywalker Ranch. I'm not sure, but no, I haven't been there. I've only been twice to San Francisco, and like the first time I went to like Chinatown, so I could check out the little Bruce Lee statue and all that sort of stuff, and wanted to check out the first Chinatown in America. Went there, and yeah, I think I just pretty much hung out in Chinatown the whole time when I was in San Francisco. I didn't really get to see a lot of the other things. Oh, then I went to the bridge. What is it's not Key Bridge, right? It's whatever the main bridge is out there. So those are the two things I did. I went out to the boardwalk and saw the bridge. It was brief, and I was surprised at how cold it was in the summer. Like this is in I think it was like in August, and it was really cold on the Bay Area like that. I was kind of surprised. I think it was the Bay Bridge, not the Golden Gate Bridge. I forget which is which, but I think it was the San Francisco Bay Bridge that I saw. But I get them confused, so. But yeah, I didn't get a chance to go check out any really cool things outside of Chinatown and going to the Bay Bridge or Golden Gate Bridge. Thomas says, hello, sir, greetings from Poland. What's up, Thomas? So yeah, I'll look it up. Because somebody says, yeah, Visions like the Animatrix, lots of amazing artists putting their spin on it. You can go, because I really don't get this whole English versus Spanish thing. I'm just going to ban people who keep saying it, because I really don't get the joke. Some of y'all need to keep these little Gen Z jokes to yourself. Like, it's to the point I don't want to say I don't want to just hate someone because of their generation, but I just think so many Gen Z people are fucking retarded. Joseph Ricci says, hi all. Anyone want to see production videos of the Master from the Acolyte? I'm not. If someone else in the stream does, that's fine. I won't. I refuse to even watch the show, much less knowing anything about the production behind the scenes. I don't respect the showrunner, Leslie Hetland. I don't like. I don't like the poor writing of the show. Don't like how they are basically destroying the canon from the first 6 movies. Um, and it seems they don't understand any of the concepts that have made Star Wars what it is. So, could care less. I don't know, Custody. It's some sort of meme that's going on online. It's it's some I don't know. It's something to do with like it's something to do with like a gay joke, basically. That's all I know. It's something to do with a gay joke. But aside from that, I don't get it. It's only funny to Gen Z people, literally. It's only funny to them because they're kind of stupid. Like I said, some of these kids need to go to World War III. Yeah, Joseph, I wasn't picking on you. I was just saying I wouldn't be particularly interested in some behind the scenes stuff about the Acolyte just because I dislike the show so much. Like I said, it's destroying canon. The showrunner doesn't know anything about the Star Wars mythos. A lot of the stuff she does know she got from Dave Filoni, and Dave Filoni, excuse me, Dave Filoni himself is not a great representation of Star Wars. Although, like I said, for years, Disney PR people have tried to pretend he was a protege of Lucas, and he wasn't. Also, I hate, and this is one of the things that make people hate the actors, and it's so this fact that I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna end the stream. So again, I was saying earlier, if you weren't here, Joseph, but I was saying earlier, people need to stop attacking actors for the parts they play in unlikable shows and movies because it's not the actors' fault because they're not the decision makers, right? And I was saying that the actress who played Rey Palpatine, I'm not calling her Rey Skywalker, but the actress who played Rey Palpatine, the actor who played Finn, the the actress who played the Asian character in Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, and some other actors like Ahmad Best back from the prequel trilogies have been mercilessly attacked online for the parts they played in very unlike movies and TV shows, and it's not their fault. But sometimes these filmmakers set them up for failure because they'll send these actors on press tours and then give them like things to say which are patently not true, and these actors don't know any better. So one of the things they've done currently with the Acolyte is they had these actors come out and say they were huge fans of Star Wars, and it's not true because the one actor who plays this Black Jedi Knight in the new Acolyte said he was a huge fan of Star Wars, and they was asking him his favorite parts, and he was saying he loved the part when Anakin blew up the Death Star. And I'm like, wait, what? I was like, I'm like, come on, who set that man up like that? Anakin blew up the Death Star. I was like, oh, they set that man up so bad. There's no way he's a fan. Um, it's horrible. And then they had him come back on another interview, and he was talking about what he liked about Star Wars is there's no good or evil. It's basically just how you use the Force. And I'm like, what? Why are they letting this guy talk? I was like, he's making it so apparently obvious he's not an actual fan of Star Wars, nor does he even understand what it's about. I was like, whoever set him up to say that stuff on the press tour for the Acolyte, did him a disservice. They did all those actors who were on that interview panel a disservice, because it was just so obvious that they didn't know what they were talking about. If I was the actor or actress, I would just be honest. I'd be like, hey, you know what? Before taking on this role, I've never really watched Star Wars and wasn't a fan, but I'm getting to know more about it now as I've become a part of this legacy. If they said something like that, no one would have been mad at that. Like, they'd have been like, okay, like, we understand this is a job for most actors. They're not going to be a fan of everything they're starring in. No one should expect them to be. But if they just simply said, I'm not a fan, but I'm learning more about this franchise now that I'm a part of it, people would have respected that answer. It was honest and it was respectful. But to sit there and lie about being a fan and then talk, basically spit out things that everyone knows is not true about Star Wars, it it, it not only was it a disservice to them, but it's going to anger the fans, because now they're thinking you're like, you think they're dumb. So some of these actors are being done dirty by these decision makers behind these films, because they're set out on these press release tours and told to say told to say told to say that they're fans of these projects so that people will like them more in their roles in these shows and movies, and they don't know what they're talking about. But that's all I had to say about that. I'm gonna just see what the last comments were, and I'm gonna end this, guys. All right. Because somebody says, yeah, I watched Acolyte episode 4 this morning. I'm still disappointed. Joseph Ricci says, just wanted you to notice Ryan Johnson worked with Leslie when they did the storyboards. Ryan is not credited, but he had a major role in the Acolyte. Shh, not many people notice. Really? I mean, guys, I can't confirm nor deny what Joseph Ricci has just said, but if this is true, that would explain a lot. Again, Lucasfilm did not dislike Ryan Johnson. They loved so much what he did with The Last Jedi, which kind of destroyed what we understood about the Jedi, that they were going to give him a free movie deal until there was this huge fan backlash to Ryan Johnson. But he was originally going to get like a free movie deal, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was still behind the scenes working with Lucasfilm in some capacity. I mean, he had a success with that movie. Forgot the name of the movie where it's like a um, sort of like a not a thriller, but what do you call those, like detective type movies where they're trying to find out who did what, and it's starring Chris Evans, and surprise spoiler alert, he's the bad guy. And here's another, since Joseph Ricci is dropping gems on us, guys, I'm gonna drop another gem. In a movie where it's a who done it sort of scenario, one of the things you can know is the bad guy is always going to be the one who doesn't have an Apple iPhone or other Apple device, because Apple has literally made it a thing in Hollywood that bad guys cannot be associated with their products and their movies. So anyone who's not using the Apple device in the movie is the bad guy. And Chris Evans was the one not allowed to use a iPhone in that movie with Ryan Johnson. Um, it also starred like Craig Daniels and some other people, and there's like this murder mystery, right? But anyway, yeah, that's interesting. If it at this point that's just a rumor, so we can't confirm what Joseph Ricci said, but might be possible that um, Ryan Johnson had some say in the content of the Acolyte. We already know Dave Filoni gave her input into these Force Witches. So, as much as people hate the Force Witches, these lesbian space witches, blame Filoni for that, because too many people think too many people have given Dave Filoni a free pass, including me. I thought he was like sincerely involved with preserving George Lucas' legacy within the new Star Wars projects, and he's not. He's one of the main people corrupting it. And he was the one who told Leslie Hillen to go ahead and do these Force Witches who are not the Night Sisters. So, but if Ryan Johnson has something to do with it, we'll see. Wouldn't be surprised. Because so he says, yeah, please never hate on the actor for playing a role. They're not directors. Yeah. I was just saying, but these decision makers need to stop setting up these actors as well, sending them on these press release tours and have them lie about being huge fans of these projects when they never were. But anyway, that's all I got to really say about that. Joseph says Ryan and Leslie are. Sorry, let me. Ryan and Leslie are very good friends. Could be the case. I know she's ugly as shit and seems to have projected her own personal. I mean, it's not. I guess it should be unfair because it seems all filmmakers kind of project a part of themselves into the protagonists of their movies. Like clearly, George Lucas projected himself into both Luke and Anakin in the first 6 movies, and Kathleen Kennedy clearly projected herself onto Rey Palpatine. But the difference is Star Wars is George Lucas. It was never Kathleen Kennedy, and it definitely isn't Leslie, who doesn't know anything about Star Wars. I will blame more Kathleen Kennedy than Leslie because Kathleen has been there from the beginning. She started off as an assistant to one of the bigger producers, I think Steven Spielberg or someone, and went on to be an executive producer herself since the 80s, connected with a lot of Lucasfilm stuff from both Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and maybe Willow as well, I'm not sure. But she was involved in a lot of stuff back then. So if anyone was expected to carry on George Lucas' original ideas, it would have been her. So I blame her more than anyone else because she's the one who ultimately hired Leslie to be the showrunner for this a travesty. Um, anyway, now that we're done with that um, done with that, guys. Again, unless you have a last comment or question or some inside knowledge you want to drop on us, like Joseph did, I'm going to end this. I will be uploading it so you can watch it from its entirety. In the beginning, I give a like a 10-minute soliloquy on my thoughts of why I dislike the Acolyte, and then I've just gone on to regurgitate it throughout this whole stream, snippets of it. But I give my entire like tirade against it in the first like 10-15 minutes of the stream. So if you want to see that from the beginning, you'll see it once I upload this. Um, you'll see my little debate I had with this guy called Aggressively Relaxing, who basically just came here to troll because it was obvious that either he knew what he was saying was false or he was just too stupid to say otherwise. But in any case, I initially banned him, but then I allowed him to return so that he can come back for future streams if in good faith. To the if he comes back to future streams in bad faith, he'll be permanently banned. But that's it, guys. Oh, I mentioned Clooney actually yesterday. I don't know if you were here for the anime stream, but I did mention Clooney in my anime stream, but something completely unrelated to today. So that's it, guys. Thank you for contributing to the conversation. Let me rant about how bad the Acolyte is. And again, we're only halfway through the show. There's 4 more episodes to go. I predict it's not. I predict it's gonna get much worse before it gets much better. Oh, and I forgot to say earlier. I was saying that there's still 3 movies that Disney are claiming are still going to get made, because there's been about like at least 8 movies they've canceled already that never got made, that they've been promising since 2018. They've gotten canceled because of backlash against the franchise, the sequel trilogy. So one movie we know is currently in production is the Rey movie about her rebuilding the Jedi Order, and there's even rumors that it's going to be called A New Jedi Order. Then there's one that's supposed to be called Dawn of the Jedi, or something to that extent, which sounds very familiar to the name of the title that was going to be made by the producers of Game of Thrones when they were originally hired to come on and create a new movie about the beginning. About they were going to do a movie, I think, about the beginning of the Sith or something. I don't remember, but I remember them reacting kind of hostile in a very they were upset with how the title was kind of ripped from what they wanted to do. So there's going to be a movie about the very first Jedi, and I'm not very confident about it, because looking at the way Star Wars is doing it, the first Jedi is going to be a non-binary black woman who who who's like I don't know. It's going to be insane. I wouldn't trust them to give us the very first Jedi. But it's supposed to be directed by the guy who did Logan. So if you like Logan, if you like that director, he did both Logan and the movie The Wolverine. He's kind of good. However, I think he's sort of a one-trick pony, because in both movies he did about Wolverine, it seemed like it seemed like he didn't know how to use Wolverine other than taking away his powers, because in both movies he did the same thing. He took away his powers to have him fight regular people. But it seems like he doesn't know how to do a Wolverine movie without taking away Wolverine's powers. So I'm not confident that he can do a Jedi movie, since he seems uncomfortable knowing how to work with characters who have superpowers. um, but we'll see. And then the third movie is a Mandalorian spin-off movie that's going to take the Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and Book of Boba Fett, and take the characters from those movies and put them in this movie that shows the aftermath of Grand Admiral Thrawn coming back to the galaxy after he's been freed. So those are the 3 movies that are supposed to still be made by Disney if they don't get canceled. I know the Rey one for sure isn't getting canceled, just because they've put too much into it already. Like, this is Kathleen Kennedy's own personal project that she wants to oversee, because she is obviously that she sees a projection of herself into the Rey Palpatine character. So that was I forgot to mention that earlier when I was saying the 3 movies that are still on slate to be produced, to be released. But thanks, Casoda. You have a great day or evening as well. I'm gone, guys. Check you later. Okay? And may the force be with you. Always.